Chapter 282. Entering the cave, Li Daochong slightly released his telekinesis, and the range of his detection increased by quite a bit. The strange thing was that the 3 death auras behind him had disappeared. Did he go the wrong way? The auras of the 3 Jin Dan cultivators had also disappeared without a trace. Li Daochong felt that it was strange that there was another strange aura that was very similar to Ouyang Xian's aura hidden in the dark. This aura was much stronger than Ouyang Xian's. At this time, Yiren Fei also ran out from another cave. He looked a bit embarrassed, and his face was covered in dirt. Seeing Li Daochong and Li Shumei standing side by side, Yiren Fei immediately burned with jealousy and said coldly, "Shumei, come here. Be careful." Li Shumei reminded Li Daochong and walked to Yiren Fei with a bit of bitterness. Li Daochong nodded. He did not go near the undying soul coffin, and instead walked towards another cave. "Didn't the two of you catch up?" Yiren Fei said to Li Shumei with a serious face. "Ren Fei, don't be so paranoid, okay?" Li Shumei pleaded with a hint of pleading. "Suspicious? Hee. Li Shumei, you think too highly of yourself. Do I need to be suspicious of you? You're just a servant given to me by the Li family. You'll soon know that Li Daochong is still the same Li Daochong. I'll step on that brat in front of you," Yiren Fei said in a low voice. Li Shumei's eyes widened. "Ren Fei, don't. Let him go. He didn't do anything to you. I beg you." Li Shumei's words made Yiren Fei even angrier. He reached out and grabbed Li Shumei's wrist, causing her to grimace in pain. "Li Shumei, I know you still have feelings for that brat. You can't even protect yourself, but you're still pleading for him. This is really touching, but is it really good for you to be so unfaithful? You're with me, but you're thinking about someone else." Yiren Fei's face turned ferocious. "Ren Fei, I didn't. After following you, there is no one else in my heart. After all, Li Daochong is a member of the Li family. I grew up with him. Should I just watch him die?" Li Shumei argued. "Li family? Humph. Would the Li family acknowledge him? Besides, you're no longer a member of the Li family. You're a member of the Yi family now. Let me tell you, I'll kill that brat later," Yiren Fei said viciously. "No, Ren Fei, please let him go," Li Shumei begged helplessly. "Li Shumei, you really don't understand me. The more you speak like this, the more I want to kill him. I'll let you know that no matter how brilliantly Daochong is in front of me, he's just an ant that I can crush at any time." Yiren Fei's expression of anger vanished, and he revealed a sinister smile. As the two spoke, they had already arrived in front of the stone platform. The undying soul coffin was wrapped in a layer of light yellow net. Around the stone platform, there were 9 round holes with a diameter of 1 meter and a depth of half a meter. When Ouyang Xian saw the 3 people who had lost track of him appear, his feminine face inadvertently revealed a light smile. Qing Feng Zi and the other cultivators circled the light net a few times, trying to destroy it, but to no avail. "Brother Ouyang, do you have a way to remove the light net?" Chang Gong was afraid of destroying the undying soul coffin, so Qing Feng Zi couldn't think of a good idea. "Yes," Ouyang Xian said straightforwardly. "Really? How we break it?" Qing Feng Zi's eyes lit up. "Use your human souls to draw the undying soul coffin, and the light net will disappear," Ouyang Xian said indifferently. Qing Feng Zi and the others didn't react for a moment, and then their expressions changed greatly. "Ouyang Xian, what do you mean?" A talisman appeared in Qing Feng Zi's hand, and he quickly pulled away from Ouyang Xian. "What do I mean? Isn't it obvious enough? Use your lives to sacrifice to the undying soul coffin, and you can open the light net. Do you understand now?" Ouyang Xian said with a smile. "Ouyang Xian, you..." Qing Feng Zi's face was ashen. The other cultivators retreated one after another, looking at Ouyang Xian as if they were facing a great enemy. Yiren Fei didn't expect Ouyang Xian to suddenly turn hostile, and an 8 alchemy talisman appeared in his hand, ready to attack at any time. With the Ghost King behind and Ouyang Xian in front, Yiren Fei's scalp went numb, and he glanced at Li Daochong, who was standing at the other side of the cave, looking at them from afar. This kid was greedy for life, but he was right to be afraid. He could turn around and run at any time. Ouyang Xian, aren't you overconfident in your own strength? None of us are your match, but if we all attack together, are you sure you can beat us? Don't forget, besides you, Senior Lu is also a Foundation establishment cultivator. A middle-aged woman said with a gloomy expression. The cultivator called Senior Lu was an old woman, and she always held a staff made of dead wood in her hand. That was her precious lifeblood, the Ice Fire Staff, a low-grade heaven-rank magic treasure. You can try, Ouyang Xian replied without fear. With that, Ouyang Xian flicked her finger, and a black light shot out, targeting Qing Fengzi. Qing Fengzi was shocked, and he quickly raised the sword in his hand. Bang! The black light hit the sword, and Qing Fengzi retreated 3 steps. Before he could steady himself, Ouyang Xian's hand turned into a claw and suddenly retracted. Qing Fengzi seemed to be caught by something and flew into the air, landing in a hole on the stone platform. As soon as he landed, a layer of black light enveloped him, and Qing Fengzi's desperate charge was useless. Then, Qing Fengzi's gaze turned sluggish, and he stood motionless in the hole with a wooden expression. His vitality quickly flowed from a black gully below the hole to the undying soul coffin. Ouyang Xian flicked her finger, and another black light shot towards the middle-aged woman. With Qing Fengzi as an example, the middle-aged woman didn't dare to block and dodged to the side. However, after the black light missed, it actually returned. Just as it was about to hit the middle-aged woman, the old woman, surnamed Lu, waved her staff, and an ice blade shot out. Bang! The ice blade and the black light canceled each other out. The middle-aged woman shouted in horror. Everyone attacked together. With that, 2 talismans shot out. Ouyang Xian opened her palm, and a round shield appeared in front of her. Bang! Bang! 2 explosions sounded as the talismans exploded. The round shield only trembled for a moment before disappearing, but it blocked all the talisman attacks. The old woman, surnamed Lu, appeared behind Ouyang Xian, and her ice fire staff heavily knocked on the ground. A flame-shaped icicle quickly spread on the ground, quickly rushing towards where Ouyang Xian was standing. Ouyang Xian didn't even look behind her. As if she had eyes, her figure flashed and disappeared. In the next moment, she appeared beside the middle-aged woman. She grabbed the middle-aged woman's head and jumped up with her, landing on the stone platform. The middle-aged woman was also thrown into the hole by Ouyang Xian. Like Qing Fengzi, the middle-aged woman was wrapped in a black light, and her eyes became sluggish as her vitality quickly disappeared. In the blink of an eye, Ouyang Xian had dealt with 2 people. Even the old woman, surnamed Lu, couldn't stop her from capturing the middle-aged woman. Ouyang Xian put down the middle-aged woman and immediately flicked her finger, shooting the black light at Li Xiumei. Li Xiumei clenched her teeth and dodged. When the black light reflected back, Yi Renfei finally made his move, and a long sword shaped like a turtle tail slashed out. The sword light was like lightning, colliding with the black light in the void and canceling it out. Ouyang Xian was surprised. Apparently, she had misjudged Yi Renfei's strength. She continued, "Yi brat, as a member of the Yi family, you shouldn't have come here. Instead of living a good life, you came here to suffer. Your Yi family can summon the wind and summon the rain on a 3rd-class cultivation planet. This little thing is nothing to you. Unfortunately, you didn't think it through. Your bloodline is a good thing, so you can't waste it." As Ouyang Xian spoke, the old woman, surnamed Lu, smashed her staff at her, but she easily dodged. The old woman, surnamed Lu, was shocked. Ouyang Xian's cultivation was the same as hers, but her true strength was far above hers. The 2 were simply not on the same level. The old woman, surnamed Lu, didn't want to fight, so she turned into a brown light and rushed away. As for the undying soul coffin, she had long forgotten about it. "Old thing, do you think it's possible to get out after coming in?" Ouyang Xian said unhurriedly. The old woman, surnamed Lu, turned a deaf ear. She sped up and shot straight into a hole. Bang! A muffled sound rang out. The old woman, surnamed Lu, slammed into an invisible wall only a few meters away from the hole. The impact made her dizzy, and she flew back dozens of meters before stopping. At this time, Li Daochong, who was standing at the other end of the hole, was startled. He turned around and flicked his finger, shooting out a stream of qi. Dong! The qi shot out a meter or two before it was blocked. There was a restriction that Li Daochong hadn't noticed. He had never seen this kind of restriction before. It was invisible and couldn't be detected by telekinesis. If it weren't for the old woman, Li Daochong might have run into it. Seeing that she couldn't escape, the old woman surnamed Lu stood up and glanced at Yi Renfei, Li Xuemei, and Li Daochong. She said, "If you three want to live, then cooperate with me to kill that damned transvestite. If I die, none of you will be able to escape." As soon as the old woman's voice fell, her body suddenly shook. Her old eyes revealed a look of despair, as if she had seen the end of the world. 3 shadows, 1 red and 2 black, shot out from the hole. A huge amount of death qi instantly enveloped the entire cave. The Ghost King's body had taken on a semi-corporeal form. His face was pale and bloodless. His hair was disheveled. His arms were white and blue, and his claws were sharp. However, his lower body had no legs and was floating in the air. The red ghost was actually a woman wearing a red rag dress. Her face couldn't be seen as her hair always covered it. The resentful bone was just like its name. It was a skeleton with bits of flesh and blood on its bones. Dark red flames were burning in its eyes, and it held a long-handled axe in its hand. The vengeful bone was the only dark ghost among the dark ghosts that used dark artifacts. It was even stronger than the red ghost. Chapter 283. When the Ghost King appeared, the smile on Ouyang Xian's feminine face became even more brilliant. Just as old woman Lu's mental defenses were about to collapse, 3 more figures shot out from another cave. Lu Xingzhan, by Yi, and Old Gun, the 3 Jin Dan cultivators of Red Sun Planet, also appeared in the cave. Old woman Lu's heart, which had fallen to the bottom of the lake, once again floated up. Yi Renfei and Li Xuemei heaved a sigh of relief. Their saviors had finally arrived. As soon as the 3 Jin Dan cultivators entered the cave, the Ghost King attacked, clawing at Lu Xingzhan. The latter easily blocked the attack with a golden longsword in hand. The red ghost pounced to Bai Yi. 1 red and 1 white immediately tangled together. Old Gun's opponent was naturally the remaining resentful bones. The confrontation of strength was always thrilling. Weapons fiercely collided, constantly producing dull sounds. The entire cave slightly trembled from their battle. Ouyang Xian sinisterly smiled and immediately pounced at Li Xuemei. When old woman Lu saw the 3 Jin Dan cultivators arrive, her spirit shook. Her entire body's spiritual energy violently surged. No matter what, she could not allow Ouyang Xian to capture her. Every time she captured one, her combat power would be reduced, and her chances of escaping would be reduced. Old woman Lu intercepted in front of Li Xuemei. Ouyang Xian struck out with a palm. The 2 palms collided, and the former hurriedly retreated more than 10 steps. Ouyang Xian did not move. Instead, she grabbed at the somewhat dumbfounded Li Xuemei. Yi Renfei kicked out to help Li Xuemei. However, Ouyang Xian suddenly turned around and firmly grabbed Yi Renfei's ankle. "Hee kid, are you still holding back? This ability is not enough to deal with me. Hurry up and activate your bloodline power." Ouyang Xian laughed. "Bah!" Yi Renfei spat. Regardless of his foot being caught, he ruthlessly stabbed at Ouyang Xian with his sword. Ouyang Xian did not dodge. She still held Yi Renfei's ankle with one hand, while the other blocked the sword without any support. Clang! A crisp sound rang out. Yi Renfei's sword came down with all his strength. Ouyang Xian only used her arm to block it. There was not even a cut mark on her arm. What? Yi Renfei's eyes widened as he stared at Ouyang Xian's arm in disbelief. The turtle-tailed longsword in Yi Renfei's hand was a top-grade, Earth-rank magic treasure. It could slice through iron like mud, and it could even slice silver into 2 with a single slash. However, he couldn't even cut through Ouyang Xian's skin. While Yi Renfei was still in shock, he felt an intense pain in his ankle. Ouyangxian's hand tightened, and a crisp sound rang out. His bones were almost broken. Yi Renfei was in so much pain that cold sweat broke out on his forehead. Damn it. He had no choice but to use his bloodline power. Yi Renfei gritted his teeth and growled, Black Tortoise transformation. Yi Renfei's body began to undergo visible changes. His muscles bulged, his skin became scaly, and a layer of gray armor-like substance covered his body. Black Tortoise transformation. The strength of Yi Renfei's aura suddenly increased, approaching that of the Foundation establishment stage. Interesting, Ouyangxian said playfully. Her hand that was grabbing Yi Renfei's ankle was obviously stretched. The transformation was completed in just a few seconds. Yi Renfei's originally somewhat disheveled expression was now full of confidence. Sorry to keep you waiting. Yi Renfei smirked and punched out. Bang! Ouyangxian caught it with one hand. Yi Renfei was stunned for a moment. He knew the strength of this punch the best. It was enough to smash a boulder into pieces. Ouyangxian casually caught it. Yi Renfei's turtle tail sword slashed towards Ouyangxian's neck. Ouyangxian's face was cold. She pushed out her palm, and a cyclone appeared in her palm, pushing it towards Yi Renfei's chest. With a bang, Yi Renfei was sent flying like a cannonball. The old woman, surnamed Lu's staff, fell, smashing Ouyangxian's shoulder with great force. However, Ouyangxian didn't seem to feel it. She turned around and smiled at the old woman. Old thing, are you in such a hurry to die? Very well, I'll fulfill your wish. Let's change the order. I'll start with you. Ouyangxian grabbed the staff and fiercely pulled. Her other hand clawed towards the old woman, surnamed Lu's head. Almost at the same time, a sharp sword stabbed in front of Ouyangxian. Although Li Xiumei was scared, she still attacked. Ouyangxian's eyes flashed. She grabbed Li Xiumei's sword and casually flung it. Li Xiumei was sent flying. The power of a Foundation establishment cultivator wasn't something a middle-stage qi condensation cultivator like Li Xiumei could withstand. Li Xiumei was sent flying like a cannonball towards a sharp corner above the cave. Her body would be pierced if she hit it. Yi Renfei sent out a stream of qi to change Li Xiumei's direction. With a bang, Li Xiumei avoided the sharp corner and hit a slightly flat wall. She spat out a mouthful of blood and fell to the ground. Her qi and blood were in turmoil. She couldn't get up for a while. Ouyangxian's strength was beyond imagination. She had already surpassed the normal level of an early-stage Foundation establishment cultivator. Li Daochong, who was about to save Li Xiumei, glanced at Yi Renfei in surprise. He didn't expect this kid to save Li Xiumei. Under the encirclement of the three, every move was aimed at a vital point. Ouyangxian was angry and launched a lightning-fast attack. Yi Renfei and the old woman, surnamed Lu, couldn't resist and were sent flying after a few moves. The two were injured to different degrees. Li Daochong tried to break the invisible barrier behind him several times, but to no avail. He simply took out a 9th-grade fire talisman and directly threw it. Boom! In the sealed space, the explosion was deafening and the cave trembled violently. The 3 Jin Dan cultivators who were fighting with the 3 powerful evil spirits were attracted over. At that moment, everyone looked in Li Daochong's direction. This kid was using a talisman to bombard the barrier. It was clear that he wanted to escape. Under the bombardment of the 9th-grade talisman, the invisible barrier didn't even have the slightest ripple. Li Daochong touched his nose and curled his lips. He only wanted to leave, but it seemed that he couldn't. Could Sung Ink break the barrier? Xiumei, did you see? This kid's temperament hasn't changed at all. He's still the same as before, as timid as a mouse. He only wants to escape and doesn't care about your life or death. Yi Renfei said disdainfully. Li Xiumei pondered silently. From a moment she met Li Daochong, this guy had been hiding at the back of the group. After entering the cave, he also chose to stand near the entrance. When something happened, he didn't help and just stood there watching. Li Xiumei looked at Li Daochong with slight disappointment. This guy was still the same as before, timid and stupid. With so many people fighting with their lives on the line, he actually stood on the side as if nothing had happened and tried to break the barrier with a talisman. No one else could do it. In fact, Li Daochong was trying to break the barrier not to escape, but to study the barrier's properties. But after several attempts, he didn't find any clues. The barrier's strength had already exceeded Li Daochong's current range of knowledge. Li Daochong didn't plan to try again. He turned around, looked at Ouyang Xian, and slowly walked towards her. Li Daochong's actions didn't make sense to Li Xiumei. Only when Li Daochong walked past her did she come back to her senses. She anxiously said, "Li Daochong, hurry up and run. With your strength, you're just going to die." Li Daochong looked down at Li Xiumei. "Where do you think you're going? The cave has been sealed. You can only enter but not leave." Li Xiumei tried to grab Li Daochong, but she couldn't. She anxiously said, "Li Daochong, are you stupid? If you can't run, it's not your turn to stand out. Hurry up and stand back." "I can't go back," Li Daochong said without turning his head. Li Xiumei's expression froze. She stared blankly at Li Daochong's thin back. No matter how she looked at it, she felt that there was a hidden meaning in those words. Li Daochong didn't stop as he spoke. He walked towards Ouyang Xian, who had a faint smile on his feminine face. "Little guy, what's wrong? Do you want to join in? This old man saw that you've been very honest, so I gave you preferential treatment. I was going to leave you as the last one. Since you can't wait, then let's do it now." Ouyang Xian said as her claw reached out to grab Li Daochong's head. "Huh." Li Daochong reached out and grabbed Ouyang Xian's wrist. This grab was very casual, as if he was just reaching out to grab something placed on a shelf. Old woman Lu stretched her neck, revealing an expression of disbelief. She was well aware of Ouyang Xian's strength. This brat, who didn't even look 20 years old, had casually caught it. How was this possible? Yuren Fei was also stunned. One had to know that even after using the black tortoise transformation, he couldn't withstand Ouyang Xian's attack. How could this brat catch it? Li Xiumei subconsciously rubbed her eyes, wondering if her eyes were playing tricks on her. As the person involved, Ouyang Xian was even more incredulous. This brat's aura was clearly pitifully weak. How could he have caught his claw? Ouyang Xian increased her strength, wanting to press down. However, the big hand holding her wrist was like an iron clamp, not moving an inch. "Can you tell me what the 9 holes on the stone platform are for? Also, why did you drag us into the holes?" Li Daochong calmly asked Ouyang Xian. Chapter 284. This young man's calmness made Ouyang Xian very annoyed. She used her telekinesis, and a flying sword floated behind her. Swoosh! It flew towards Li Daochong's head. Clang! Ka! Almost at the same time, a flying knife also floated behind Li Daochong and shot out. The flying sword and knife fiercely collided in the air. After a crisp sound, the flying sword was sent flying and a 1-inch gap appeared on the sword. Ouyang Xian was stunned. Foundation Establishment Cultivator. The old woman surnamed Lu, Yuren Fei, and Li Xiumei all stared at Li Daochong with dumbfounded expressions. Never in their wildest dreams would they have thought that Li Daochong had already entered the Foundation Establishment realm. Yuren Fei didn't want to believe that this was true. Li Daochong had already successfully entered the Foundation Establishment stage. How is this possible? Li Xiumei also couldn't believe that the once silly boy had now become a cultivator. Was this a dream? The old woman, surnamed Lu's astonishment came from Li Daochong's age. She was old and had just successfully entered the Foundation Establishment stage. This boy, who looked like he was only 18 or 19 years old, had already entered the Foundation Establishment stage. This thing called talent was really not a thing. The old woman, surnamed Lu, looked at Li Daochong with envy and jealousy. She sighed deeply. Time was unforgiving. It was good to be young. "Are you not going to answer my question?" Li Daochong's voice was cold. Although Ouyang Xian was surprised, she was not afraid. She turned a deaf ear to Li Daochong's words. Her other hand flicked, and a black light shot out. At such a close distance, the speed was so fast that there was no time to react. In Ouyang Xian's view, this boy, no matter how powerful he was, would still be caught. However, Ouyang Xian didn't know that Li Daocheng's telekinesis had locked onto him from the moment he was about to make a move. Each and every move of his was under the control of Li Daocheng. Li Daocheng slightly leaned to the side, and the black light passed by. Ouyang Xian was astonished, but she revealed a sinister smile. Was there any use in dodging it? The black ray was a tracking tool. It would not hit the target or destroy it. It would shoot toward the target endlessly. In an instant, the black light that Li Daocheng had dodged returned and shot towards Li Daocheng's back. Kid, no matter how awesome you are, you'll still have to become the undying soul coffin soul sacrifice. A cunning expression appeared on Ouyang Xian's face, but before her expression could fully blossom, she froze in place. As if she had been frozen, her eyes suddenly widening. Li Daocheng, who had been holding onto Ouyang Xian's wrist, disappeared into thin air the moment the black light reflected back. The black light shot straight towards Ouyang Xian. Bang! Ouyang Xian was struck by the black light she had shot out and was sent flying. Her body was enveloped by the black light, and she landed right in the hole on the stone platform. Ouyang Xian struggled with all her might, but it was to no avail. Very quickly, just like Qing Feng Zi and the middle-aged woman, her life force quickly disappeared. The three people's souls were instantly absorbed by the undying soul coffin. At that moment, the huge wooden coffin emitted a faint halo, and the coffin lid shook twice before calming down. Li Daocheng's eyes flashed. There was something inside the undying soul coffin. When the coffin lid shook just now, a terrifying aura came out from inside. Li Daocheng felt a chill run down his spine. He was instantly soaked in sweat, and a rare look of fear appeared on his face. That terrifying aura of death was beyond the scope of Li Daocheng's understanding. Compared to that aura of death, the Ghost King, who was currently fighting with Lu Xingzhan, was at best a worm. What kind of existence could have such a powerful aura of death? Ancestor sorcerer? Li Daocheng was shocked. If that was really the case, then no one in the cave could leave alive today. No, the entire Red Sun planet would be destroyed. Li Daocheng glanced at the three people wrapped in black light on the stone platform. Then, he looked at the 9 holes at the edge of the platform. 3 of them were occupied, while the other 6 were empty. Li Daocheng suddenly realized something. He seemed to have guessed Ouyang Xian's goal. No wonder Ouyang Xian's aura was so strange. Li Daocheng finally understood. He must have cultivated the ghost arts given to him by Dark Ghost, not a cultivation technique. Ouyang Xian had most likely been captured by Dark Ghost and turned into a puppet. Ouyang Xian had appeared here today not to fight for the undying soul coffin, but to open it. Li Daocheng instantly understood. Everything made sense now. Hades had paid such a huge price not for the undying soul coffin, but for the person lying inside. Li Daocheng looked at the undying soul coffin with a trace of fear. If the person inside woke up, it would be a disaster. At the same time, Li Daocheng subconsciously licked his lips. A trace of excitement welled up in his heart. If he could absorb the person lying inside, how many levels could he reach? However, Li Daocheng didn't dare to try absorbing such a powerful death chi. With his current strength, if an existence of this level entered his body, there would be nothing left for him. A backlash would be inevitable. Li Daocheng naturally wasn't so stupid. The only thing he could do was quickly think of a way to leave this place. If the undying soul coffin really opened, he wouldn't be able to leave even if he wanted to. Just as Li Daocheng was pondering, a scream came from behind him. He turned around and saw an arrow pierce through the back of the Jindan cultivator fighting the Ghost King. Lu Xingzhan had never imagined that he would be ambushed. He turned around and saw his old friend, the Ouyang family's ancestor Ouyang. Yibao, Ru, Ba Feizheng, Ku, Ouyang Xian, who had been hiding in the shadows and using a secret technique to cover himself. Kujie, Mu Jiuci, Baba Bai Kong Mu, Kurt, and even if his own grandson, Ouyang Xian, had been schemed against by a stranger to become a sacrifice for the undying soul coffin. Ouyang Xian, Kujie Huan Kakongmu, even if his grandson was gone, he still had his great-grandson. The chance to kill the Jindan cultivator was gone, and it would never be again. Ouyang Xian? Zhang Ying, Tan? Luan Kujia Huan? Jun? Kujia? Kujia? Just based on Ouyang Xian? Kujia Huan? Kujia Fu? Jing? Mu? Kujia Huan? All of this was in exchange for selling one's soul. But Ouyang Xian? Kujia Huan Li Zhong? Kujia Huan? Kujia Qian? Kujia Huan? When Hades gave him the mission, he knew that everything was coming to an end. To awaken the terrifying existence inside the undying soul coffin, an ordinary human soul was far from enough. Even a cultivator might not be enough. Only the souls of Jin Dan cultivators and strong cultivators could satisfy the terrifying existence's needs. Lu Xingzhan used his qi to force the arrow out of his body, but a wave of death energy invaded his body and enveloped Jin Dan. Lu Xingzhan's aura instantly weakened. Ghost King grabbed the top of Lu Xingzhan's head and threw him into the pit on the stone platform. Golden Sword Lu Xingzhan, an early Jin Dan cultivator, became a sacrifice for the undying soul coffin and died just like that. The black light shrouded him, and Lu Xingzhan's life force quickly disappeared. His full body shrank at a speed visible to the naked eye. The situation instantly took a turn for the worse. Bai Yi and Old Gun were immediately surrounded. The two could not believe that Golden Sword Lu Xingzhan died just like that. A Jin Dan cultivator died just like that. Ghost King immediately joined forces with the resentful bones to attack Old Gun. Ouyang Xian? Kujia Huan Huang? Kudong, Kujia Huan. The battle immediately began to tilt in their favor. Ouyang? Huidi? Shi, Kudu Huan? Huaxiang? Tan Ti Xie, 2, 1, Lai Na, Si Huaji Huan. He was not worried that the four of them would escape. The cave was already surrounded by a strong barrier. No one could leave. Even if a Jin Dan cultivator wanted to leave, it would take some effort. Ouyang? Kujia Huan Chu Fong? Kujia Huan Kameng Fu? Kujia Huan Lan Ji. If he could successfully complete the mission this time, Hades would bestow a Ghost King Dan to him. If he swallowed it, he would be Ouyang? Kujia Huan Tai Dan? Kujia Huan Zhong? Kujia Huan Zaoing? Kujia Huan. No one could resist this temptation. Ouyang? Kujia Huan, Lai Na, Si Huaji Huan? Kujia Huan, Ku Huaijio, Kujia Huan. Old Gun and Resentful Bone were evenly matched. With the addition of the Ghost King, Old Gun immediately fell into a disadvantageous position. He could only defend, unable to counterattack. The same was true for Bai Yi. The red shadow ghost she was fighting with was already on the verge of breaking through and was incomparably fierce. In a one-on-one fight, Bai Yi could only fight it to a draw. Ouyang? Kujia Huan Zhong? Kujia Huan Kujia Kujung? Kushao Kujun? Kujia Huan. Old woman Lu saw that the situation was bad. She desperately rushed to help, but before she could do anything, she was hit by the Ghost King's palm and lost half her life. The malicious Ghost King then threw the old woman, surnamed Lu, into the hole. A battle of this level was not something that could be interfered with just because others wanted to. The whole cave trembled in the fierce battle, as if it was in danger of collapsing at any time. Old Gun controlled his cannonball-like magic treasure, Skybell Hammer, to wildly bombard the place. However, the effect was minimal. The half of the Ghost King's dark body was extremely tough. It was not afraid of this level of bombardment. The long axe in the Resentful Bone's hand was also a dark treasure, comparable to the Skybell Hammer. The spiritual energy in Old Gun's body was being consumed at an alarming rate. From time to time, He would take out spiritual herbs and swallow them to forcibly restore his spiritual energy. Bai Yi's situation was even worse. Ouyang, Kujie Huan, Kujie Huan, Kujie Huan, Kujie Huan, Kujie Huan, Kujie Huan, Kujie Huan. Bai Yi's magic robe was damaged in many places. The red ghost claws were like the upper half of the Ghost King's body. It condensed into a dark body and was no longer in a ghost state. With one claw, it could crush magic treasures, not to mention magic robes. Bai Yi's white robes had been torn to shreds, and there were holes everywhere. A large part of her back was exposed, and her slender white right leg was almost completely exposed. Her arm had been torn open, and there was a foot-long bloody wound. It was a terrifying sight. Her lower abdomen was also scratched. A piece of her chest was also missing, revealing her fair and full snow-white skin. There was also a shallow trace of blood hanging on her chest. Ouyang, Chao Ping Yuan, Lao Lao Xin Kong Mu Qian Fuji. Lang, Kujie Huan, Kujie Huan, Kujie Huan, Kujie Huan, Kujie Huan, Kujie Huan. That was Bai Yi's life gate. If she was hit, even if she did not die, she would lose half of her life. Ouyang, Kujie Huan, Kujie Huan, Kujie Huan. Kujie Huan, 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 Kujie Huan. This old man is now in hell. Why should I worry about going to hell? Miss Bai, you should worry about yourself. Chao Di Panji Shi Huang. Hashtag protect. Catharsis. Excesses are hurtful, and hurtful. The hidden weapon used to sneak attack Lu Xingzhan was a crossbow. Was this Ouyang? Plotting for a long time? Violent Hydra? Moreover? What? Gamma? Locust, Gray Elm, Wild Rosewood, 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 Connor. The reason why Bai Yi kept retreating was that most of her attention was on Ouyang. Yi Zhong Xie? Josh. The Scabbard of Desolation Luck? Brigade? Tier Fimu? Ao Bai Yi saw that she was about to be forced into a corner. 18 white threads stretched out like the tentacles of an octopus, desperately fighting back. 7 of the white ribbons entangled the red shadow ghost, while the other 11 ribbons shot towards Ouyang Ming. Shun Ouyang? Kai Shan, K Cloth Shake Fresh? Looking at him in fear. Phi Collapse? Purple Spoon Cherry? Kai. Subizin? Chasing after Pei Zi? Was he talking about Mu Song Yao with his heart? Apologize? Chase after Ma Xian? Huang Zheng? Change a hurry? Kujiji? Go up. Ying. Purple Spoon, Huaina His Tan, Lai Huang Lan Lai Zhu. Locust Bad Mu AI. Iridium Bad Medium. Purple Spoon, Yu Luo Temple. Wana Lang Shua. Barium? Puffed. In Ouyang? Xian Luo, Wa Bao. Words died Dong Uranium. Chung Ji. What? The laughter stopped abruptly. Chapter 285. Ouyang, are you trying to scare me? What? Trampling the drought and dragging the mountain range punishment? What is jealousy? What is jealousy? Du Jiahao, how could this be? Obsidian Stew, White Rebellion? Luyan? Jizheng? Pool? Morning Song Toad, the strange young man who had plotted against his grandson, stood behind him with a calm expression, both hands holding the hilt of his saber. Bai Yi was also surprised. She thought that she was going to die here today. She didn't expect that someone would come out of nowhere and save her. However, Bai Yi could not understand how that young man could appear in Ouyang City without a trace. Sheng Qinyu? Drum Bad Hole Sandalwood Fee? Shun, the body of a Peak Foundation establishment stage cultivator, had long been spiritualized. It was not something a mortal body could compare to. Normal weapons would not be able to penetrate it. Could that saber be a mystical spirit treasure? No, it wasn't a mystical spiritual treasure. That saber didn't have the spiritual chi of an artifact spirit. It couldn't be a mystical spiritual treasure. Yi Renfei watched in astonishment as Li Daochong pierced through the body of a cultivator at the peak of the Foundation establishment stage. His entire body felt unwell. How was this possible? Li Xiumei, who had suffered internal injuries, opened her eyes wide. Her beautiful black pupils trembled slightly. The youth who had grown up with her had now become so unfamiliar. Li Daocheng's strength far exceeded everyone's expectations. In fact, could Li Daocheng stab through Ouyang? Constriction? Leech? Are you going to recite alfalfa? Rosefinch, scabbard, poke, poke, poke? Cymbidium maxim. If it was a real human cultivator at the peak of the Foundation establishment stage, Li Daocheng's saber would not be able to pierce through that easily. It would already be good if it could pierce through the flesh. Every single strand of hair on Li Daocheng's body was the nemesis of the dark body. Coupled with the enhancement of the spiritual yang lightning, the Tsang ink itself was also an extraordinary heaven-grade artifact. With all these factors put together, Ouyang Ming's saber strike would be fatal. Huaitan? Of course, this kind of injury was not enough for Ouyang. Although it hurts, it's like a mosquito. Hold. Leftovers? Fee. Chi. Beetle nut? Cleavage? Jieshenji, little brat. You're courting death. Ha ha. Bolt? Zhenzeng. Ouyang. How luo xiao huan lai? A trip to Wan Lai? Exchanging for a soul? Zhoping fawning? Apple you see yuan lai pang chong cha. However, Li Daocheng would never give it to Ouyang. Zong Tianni? Curtain? Placing the legs in Huang? Xian for Sakura? Look at me coldly? Fee. What's the matter? Panic? Orfish. The best target for Li Daocheng's sneak attack was an Ouyang. Constriction? Choking Xian and rustling? D. Fee. Ostrich afraid of the headland? But Li Daocheng didn't care about the success rate. He schemed against Ouyang Xian and made him the guardian spirit of the undying soul coffin. Ouyang? Sodium and sodium? Huang are lie? Li Daocheng would never believe that there was nothing going on between the two of them. The Jindan cultivator who had been ambushed earlier had called out Brother Ouyang before he died. Ouyang Xian was also surnamed Ouyang, and the two of them were clearly related by blood. They had both sold their souls to Hades. Ouyang? Han Xin Acripoid, Wan Lai Dan. Was Huang Qiaochun playing a trick in her spasms? Bad buck dregs and buttermilk? Huan Yu Jie Wu Lai Yu. Therefore, Li Daocheng wanted Ouyang no matter what. An idiot in a corner? Leap? Shellfish Muscle. Li Daocheng could basically confirm that these two were Ouyang family's old ancestors, one of the four great families of the Scarlet Sun Star. Even if he managed to escape, Ouyang? Hua Huang was defeated. Dipped in beach is messy, therefore, in Ouyang. Squid warranty? Wan Leba was stunned. Suck on me? Copy. Li Daocheng had no pity or sympathy for someone who had sold their soul to Dark Ghost. If he did attack, he would attack with lethal force. Ouyang? Sheng Huanlo? Protect? Official channel? Different from each other. Beep. Ghost Golem killed, soul power gained. Hesitating Ouyang? What is the meaning of this? Ci go Randu Wei Jiao Jia? Shanning Tomb? Huh? Was an appendix? Theta Chengmu wields weapon to steal Earth Yo-Yo. It was better than nothing. Little brother, thank you. Bai Yi grinned at Li Daocheng. You're welcome, Li Daocheng replied faintly. Then he slashed again. Li Daocheng did not kill Ouyang. Pan Shayu? Mao? Invading Xinyuya? Maoya? Maoya Mozi? Shanxi? G. The Red Shadow Malicious Ghost was a high-level vengeful spirit among the Dark Ghosts. In ancient times, the Red Shadow Malicious Ghost was the Hades Red Shadow Malicious Ghost. According to legend, it was a persecuted woman. Because of hatred, she did not care about the world. Wearing red clothes, she committed suicide in the middle of the night. In reality, a dead person could not be revived, nor could they become a ghost. It was the Red Shadow Malicious Ghost that was attracted by the woman's resentment and devoured it. The Red Shadow Malicious Ghost was inherent and was not transformed by the woman who committed suicide. Coincidentally, the Red Shadow Malicious Ghost looked like a woman with disheveled hair and dressed in red clothes. Li Daocheng's saber was imbued with spiritual yang lightning. It was the fourth stage of the 9-split saber art, Heaven Collapsing Slash. The Red Shadow Malicious Ghost pounced. It did not expect the human cultivator who had his back to it to not dodge. Instead, he slashed at it without warning. Ghosts were naturally not afraid of physical damage. The Red Shadow malicious ghost's instinctive reaction was not to be afraid. However, when the saber flashed at it, the Red Shadow malicious ghost's eyes suddenly widened. The Red Shadow malicious ghost's eyes suddenly widened. The saber flashed with blue lightning. Lightning was one of the dark ghost's nemesis. Ah! The Red Shadow malicious ghost let out a cry of fear. It suddenly stopped pouncing. However, because the impact was too strong, the sudden turn caused its ghost body to distort in the void. Li Daochong did not hold back in this attack. It was extremely fast. The Red Shadow malicious ghost was still half a beat too slow. The saber flashed past the Red Shadow's shoulder. Chi lightning flashed. The Red Shadow malicious ghost was sent flying. It slammed heavily into the wall surrounding the cave. The invisible wall itself was formed by energy. The ghost body could not pass through it. The Red Shadow malicious ghost was like a human crashing into a wall. The ghost body's dark red light instantly dimmed. "Eh!" Bai Yi exclaimed softly. Her beautiful eyes stared blankly at Li Daochong. This young man was actually able to force the Red Shadow malicious ghost to retreat with one strike. Impressive. Bai Yi knew that she was not capable of this when she was at the early stage of Foundation establishment. "Senior, what are you looking at? Aren't you going to help?" Li Daochong frowned. He turned to look at Bai Yi, who was standing to the side. Yiren Fei was standing to the side. Li Daochong was actually using such a tone to speak to a Jindan cultivator. Wasn't this courting death? "You brat, do you really think you are invincible?" "Yes, you are very impressive now. Breaking through to the Foundation establishment stage at such a young age, you could be considered a genius in the entire Federation. But in front of a Jindan cultivator, you're just a slightly stronger dog or cat. Killing you is just a matter of thought. The higher the cultivation level, the greater the gap. On the surface, the difference between Foundation establishment and Jindan cultivators was only one level. But this gap was like a chasm. Compared to the gap between Qi gathering and Qi refining, it was hundreds of times larger. Li Xuemei and Yi Renfei had similar thoughts. Although they were shocked by Li Daochong, hearing him speak to a Jindan cultivator in such a manner, Li Xuemei immediately broke out in a cold sweat for Li Daochong. This brat seemed to still have his stupidity from back then. I'm sorry. Little brother's movements just now were so cool. I was stunned." Bai Yi lost her voice. Her face revealed a bashful expression. "What?" Yiren Fei's face was filled with confusion. Li Xuemei's expression was sluggish. It was understandable that the Jindan female cultivator did not bother with Li Daochong's bad attitude. After all, this was a critical period. But a dignified Jindan female cultivator used such a coquettish tone to reply to a brat who had just entered the Foundation establishment stage. What the hell was going on? It must be an illusion. Yiren Fei thought to himself. Then he shook his head. No, it was not an illusion. It must be that the Jindan female cultivator cultivated some kind of technique that required the boy to be her furnace. It must be like this. Otherwise, it would not make sense. Chapter 286. Bai Yi and Li Daochong, who had regained their senses, attacked the Red Shadow ghost at the same time. Just at this moment, a black shadow suddenly flashed over. It was Ouyang Yi, Zizidia, Zizidia, Ouyang, Yi, Yilang, Na, Huang, That black shadow was Ghost King. Li Daochong and Bai Yi looked at each other. They had no time to divert their attention to continue attacking the Red Shadow ghost. The resentful Bones held Old Gun back, making it impossible for him to escape. 6 of the 9 holes on the stone platform had already been filled up. There were still 3 holes left. Did the malicious Ghost King abandon Ouyang? Yi? What mess? What mess? What a mess. Yiren Fei turned pale with fright. He turned around and ran without any intention to resist. The Ghost King was not someone he could deal with. But before he could run 2 steps, a strong suction force pulled him in. Fei used all his strength, but couldn't run even half a step. Instead, his body was pulled back. Pa! The Ghost King's ferocious claws covered Fei's head. With a light lift, Fei was lifted off the ground and flew towards the stone platform. No, let me go. I'm willing to become Hades' most loyal partner. Fei was scared out of his wits and shouted. Li Shumei was stunned to see Fei, who was being held by the Ghost King, say such unbearable words. She sighed in her heart. In the end, she had chosen the wrong person. The malicious Ghost King turned a deaf ear to Fei's howls and quickly threw Fei into the pit. No matter how much Fei struggled, it was useless. A black light enveloped him. Fei's eyes almost popped out of their sockets. He couldn't believe that he had died just like that. Reality was cruel. In just a few seconds, Fei turned into a dried corpse. Li Daochong could sense that the deathly aura within the undying soul coffin was recovering at an astonishing rate. Once the last 2 holes were filled, it would be time for the person lying inside to come out of the coffin. The Ghost King left Fei behind and flew towards Li Shumei. Its sharp claws pressed down on Li Shumei. Li Shumei looked at the Ghost King in despair. Her face was as pale as a sheet of paper. She smiled sadly. People always had to pay the price for their choices. It was just that the price he had to pay was too heavy. He had actually gambled his life. Clang! A crisp sound was heard. Just when Li Shumei thought that she was going to die, a dark green saber appeared out of nowhere and blocked half a meter above her. It collided with the Ghost King's claws. Daochong. Li Shumei looked at Li Daochong in shock. She didn't think that Li Daochong would come to save her. Li Daochong gave up the best opportunity to kill the Red Shadow malicious ghost and used all his strength to save Li Shumei. It wasn't that he still had feelings for his first love. It was that Li Daochong wanted to stop the undying soul coffin from opening no matter what. Of course, other than that, some fragments of memories would still trigger Li Daochong. Some of the previous owner's feelings would still affect the current Li Daochong. However, Li Daochong didn't have any feelings for Li Shumei. He only had the memories left behind by the previous owner. The Canyang flickered with spirit yang lightning. Even the Ghost King felt extremely uncomfortable. It was bounced back more than 10 meters. On a claws? Sheng Li Nuoyao. Li Daochong threw 2 talismans to Li Shumei and hurriedly said, "Take them, just in case." As he spoke, Li Daochong rushed towards the Ghost King. Li Shumei stared blankly at the back that was no different from before. Her face inadvertently revealed a lonely expression. If you hadn't left him back then, what would the situation be like now? Li Shumei looked down at the 2 talismans Li Daochong gave her. She immediately sucked in a breath of cold air. They were actually 2 level 9 talismans. Even the Ghost King wouldn't dare to take a level 9 talisman head-on. Li Shumei raised her head again and looked at Li Daochong, who was fighting the Ghost King in the air. She softly said, "I'm sorry." Li Daochong naturally couldn't hear this apology. Even if he heard it, he wouldn't feel much. After all, the one who liked Li Shumei wasn't him, but the previous owner. His aesthetic standards were different from the previous owners. If he had woken up earlier, Li Shumei wouldn't have had anything to do with him. The Ghost King was the most powerful existence among the malicious ghosts. It was the final form of a malicious ghost's evolution. After that, it was the Soul Catcher Ghost, which was another level of Dark Ghost. The Soul Catcher Ghost was the transitional stage of Dark Ghost. After that, it was the Hades Aristocrat class. Li Daochong didn't dare to be careless against the Ghost King. He used all the saber techniques of the 9-split saber technique. Not only did the Ghost King block all of them, but the splitting effect was also cancelled out. It wasn't a threat at all. After Li Daochong reached the foundation establishment stage, the last and 9th saber techniques of the 9-split saber technique had appeared. However, he hadn't tried it yet. He wasn't confident and didn't dare to use it rashly. After Li Daochong comprehended the 9th level, the 9-split slash, he realized that this move required an astonishing amount of spirit chi. Even if he reached the foundation establishment stage, he would have to use up all his spirit chi. The power wasn't small. If it couldn't cause fatal damage to the enemy, he would die. Therefore, Li Daocheng didn't want to use this move unless it was absolutely necessary or absolutely certain. Li Daocheng didn't hold back anymore. He took out all his talismans and attacked the Ghost King. He gave Ishuame 2 talismans. He still had 3 level 8 talismans and 3 level 9 talismans. Li Daocheng wished he had a level 10 talisman. The scene of the level 10 talisman blasting the withered life ghost into the sky was still vivid in his mind. It was really powerful. Li Daocheng didn't dare to stop. After using the 9-split saber technique, 3 level 8 talismans shot out. Bang! 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 The 3 level 8 talismans bombarded the Ghost King's body like 3 super cannonballs. The power couldn't be underestimated. However, the Ghost King's half-dark body was even stronger. He took the attack head-on and was unharmed except for being pushed back. Li Daocheng's heart sank. He had used all his trump cards, but they couldn't cause any fatal damage to the Ghost King. The 8th stage of the 9-split saber technique, Sky Slash. Song ink shot out, turning into a dark green light and shooting towards the Ghost King. Bang! The Ghost King's half-dark body instantly exploded and disappeared like mist. Song ink passed through the void and shot at the barrier, then rebounded and stabbed into the ground. Li Daocheng's eyes flashed. He waved his hand, and a level 9 talisman shot out. Boom! There was a violent explosion. It hit the Ghost King, who was condensing on the other side, and sent him flying. At this time, Bai Yi, who was suppressing the red ghost not far away, revealed a look of amazement. That kid was only at the early stage of the Foundation establishment stage, but he could suppress the Ghost King with a thunderous attack. Bai Yi didn't think she had such ability. Li Daocheng was the son of the former head of the Li family, Li Tianyang, from Blue Bay Star. He lost his mother when he was young. He was lazy and his spirit meridians had dried up, so he was a cripple. Before the age of 17, he was unknown. He relied on his father's reputation to make a name for himself, but was bullied and ridiculed by his peers. A year ago, he suddenly rose to prominence. First, he won first place in the 3-school Blue Bay Star exam. Then, he won first place in the hegemony competition. However, he was ostracized and his ranking was revoked. During the competition, he killed a disciple of the Zhao family by mistake and became enemies. Li Qianyang's enemies hit him when he was down. He was protected by Qian Chonghai. After hiding for a while, he appeared at Northern Yang University on Red Sun Planet. He took first place in the direct test and was qualified for the final spot in the 100-school joint exam. He was valued by the military and was valued by Qin Zhan, the outstanding general of the Cultivation Army's Northern Army Corps. He was recruited but rejected. After that, Li Daocheng disappeared for half a month. Bai Yi quickly scanned through all the information she could find on Li Daocheng. As the patrolman of Red Sun Planet, how could she not know the whereabouts of the geniuses there? This Li Daocheng, who had appeared out of nowhere, had been on her watch list as early as 2 months ago. It was just that Bai Yi hadn't expected to run in a Li Daocheng here. Based on the information, Li Daocheng was naturally very strong. Bai Yi, who had participated in the direct test before, naturally knew what it meant to get first place. But even so, Bai Yi hadn't expected Li Daocheng to be able to beat Ghost King to the point that he didn't even have a chance to breathe. This was 2F King awesome. Chapter 287. After more than 10 rounds, in the eyes of outsiders, Li Daocheng was indeed suppressing the Ghost King. The Ghost King's strength was comparable to a Jin Dan cultivator. It was the only one among the Ghost Kings who could really threaten a Jin Dan cultivator. To be able to suppress the Ghost King, one had to be at least at the early stage of Jin Dan. Li Daocheng was only at the early stage of Foundation establishment. It was amazing that he was able to suppress the Ghost King at this time. However, only Li Daocheng knew his own difficulties. The reason why he had the upper hand was that he had taken out all his trump cards in one go and attacked wildly. On the surface, he was suppressing the Ghost King, but none of these attacks caused any damage to the Ghost King. Li Daochong still had two ninth-level talismans in his hand, as well as the Spirit Sun Lightning that he had not fully used. In addition, he had not used the ninth level of the Nine-Crack Saber technique. Every time Li Daochong attacked, he felt like he was hitting a bronze wall. It was all bark and no bite. The Ghost King did not care at all. The netherworld flame in his eyes was burning more and more fiercely, and his anger was spreading. Li Daochong held its song ink tightly and looked serious. Just now, the ninth-level talisman did not cause any damage to the Ghost King. The dark body was really powerful. If it was the dark body, the spiritual energy from the ninth-level talisman would be enough to annihilate it. Li Daochong sniffed. His cultivation was still a little low, and his cultivation method seemed to be a little lacking. For the first time, the Nine-Crack Saber technique did not work. At this time, Li Daochong thought of the great void swordsmanship that Chu Qianwei gave him. He had not had time to study it after he reached Foundation Establishment. What a pity, Li Daochong murmured to himself. Little brother, sneak attack the Red Shadow. We will work together to deal with the Ghost King. A telekinesis sound transmission came, and Bai Yi's voice sounded in his ear. Li Daochong's eyes flickered, but his expression didn't change. He looked at the Ghost King who was sent flying and raised his hands, as if he was performing some kind of dark art. Li Daochong shouted, Demon Beast Talisman, Level 10 Talisman. This shout was so loud that the Ghost King, who had just been attacked by a Level 9 Talisman, paused and looked hesitantly at Li Daochong with a ferocious face. The Ghost King still had a lingering fear in his heart. The attack just now had made him feel very uncomfortable. Even now, the death energy in his dark body had not stabilized. As he shouted, Li Daochong made a gesture of swinging his hand. Startled, the Ghost King instinctively dodged to the side. Li Daochong's lips curled into a sly smile. Swinging his hand was just an action, nothing was launched. It was just a feint. The moment the Ghost King dodged, Li Daochong turned around and shot out like a sharp arrow. Whoosh! The blade flashed past, and a giant Song Ink's blade shadow suddenly appeared. The injured Red Shadow malicious ghost was completely suppressed by Bai Yi. It didn't expect Li Daochong, who was fighting the Ghost King, to suddenly attack. The Red Shadow malicious ghost couldn't dodge and let out a heart-wrenching scream of fear. If such a scream suddenly rang out in the middle of the night, a timid person would most likely have a heart attack from fear. Song Ink's blade slashed down with earth-shattering momentum towards the Red Shadow malicious ghost. The dark red dark body was split in half, as if it was a corpse. The splitting of the dark body wasn't fatal, but could instantly reassemble and become a whole again. The Red Shadow malicious ghost thought so too. But when it wanted to reassemble, sparks flashed on the split dark body, and then the dark body expanded like it was filled with air. Bang, bang, bang. The two halves of the dark body exploded continuously. The Red Shadow malicious ghost didn't have time to react before it was annihilated by the 9 split blade technique. Beep! Red Shadow malicious ghost killed. Soul power gained. A notification sounded in Li Daochong's mind. The spirit chi in his body quickly rose, and his already stabilized cultivation became even thicker and more solid. The spirit-based placenta was completely formed and stabilized, but it was still some distance away from the peak of the early stage of Foundation establishment. Roar! When Li Daochong killed the Red Shadow malicious ghost, a thunderous roar came from behind him. That sound didn't belong to the human world. The Ghost King's body burned with black flames, and the netherworld fire completely erupted like the anger in its heart. A black skeleton condensed and shot towards Li Daochong like a meteor. Be careful! The Ghost King summoned a death fire puppet. Bai Yi cried out. How could Li Daochong not know the power of the death fire puppet? When Li Tianyang fought at the border, he was also injured by this move and had to recuperate for half a year to recover. Li Daochong didn't have many trump cards left, and the Spirit Sun Lightning was the only way he could think of to restrain the death fire puppet. In an instant, Li Daochong's body flashed with electricity. Spirit Sun Lightning. Li Daochong forcibly condensed a blue lightning ball with a diameter of 0.5 meters in his hand. Pop! Lightning shot out. At the same time, Bai Yi also made her move. The white phoenix silk ribbon flew out of her hand like a white snake. Phoenix silkworm soul lock. Bai Yi shouted softly. Boom! Crackle! The spirit sun lightning ball and the death fire puppet collided, and fierce sparks erupted. Lightning flashed and thunder roared, and black flames soared into the sky. The two opposing energies melted and annihilated each other. In the blink of an eye, the spirit sun lightning ball disappeared. The death fire puppet was still burning fiercely, and it split into 3 skulls made of black flames that crashed towards Li Daochong. A white ribbon flashing with golden light shot out at high speed. However, the white ribbon didn't stop the 3 death fire puppets. Instead, it passed through them and shot toward the Ghost King. Li Daochong's pupils shrank. Bai Yi wasn't helping him block, but using him as bait. Her target was the Ghost King. Li Daochong's expression darkened. Song ink instantly appeared in his hand, and 2 level 9 talismans shot out without hesitation. Li Daochong didn't want to keep any trump cards in his hand. It was already good enough that he could keep his life. Bang bang. The 2 level 9 talismans struck 2 of the death fire puppets. Although the spirit sun lightning ball had been annihilated, it had already neutralized a portion of the death fire puppet's dark flames. The 3 death fire puppets that had split apart weren't as powerful as the previous one. The level 9 talismans were enough to neutralize it. Li Daochong didn't face the other death fire puppet head-on. He dodged, but the death fire puppet instantly changed direction and locked onto Li Daochong like a homing missile. The death fire puppet's reaction speed was far faster than Yangshin's blacklight. Li Daochong felt a chill run down his spine. He didn't have time to dodge. All of his spirit energy gathered in his hands, and the remaining spirit sun lightning ball converged onto Song ink. Li Daochong swung the Song ink like a baseball bat at the death fire puppet. Boom! Li Daochong felt intense pain in the web between his thumb and forefinger. He felt as if his entire body was on fire. Puffed. He spat out a mouthful of blood and was sent flying. He slammed heavily into a wall several dozen meters away and landed on the ground. Li Daochong's powerful spatial perception came into play. He didn't crash into the ground. Even though he was injured, he still landed firmly on his feet. His 2 months of hellish training with Chu Qianwei had paid off. If he hadn't, he would have been injured even more. The death fire puppet had been defeated by Li Daochong. Bai Yi was shocked again. It wasn't that she didn't want to save Li Daochong, but the Ghost King was too difficult to deal with. If she didn't seize the opportunity to deal a heavy blow, even if she and Li Daochong worked together, they might not be a match for the Ghost King. This Ghost King wasn't an ordinary Ghost King. It was half a step into the ranks of soul catcher ghosts. It could even summon a death fire puppet. An ordinary Ghost King wouldn't be able to do that. Bai Yi appreciated Li Daochong very much. She didn't want this rising star to fall. She didn't want the Federation to lose a trump card against the Hades in the future. But between killing the Ghost King and saving Li Daochong, Bai Yi chose the former. A single Ghost King wasn't enough to save such a talented young man. But she couldn't kill this Ghost King. The terrifying existence inside the undying soul coffin on the stone platform might awaken. When that happened, the entire Scarlet Sun planet would be finished. Between a 4th-class cultivation planet and a rising star, Bai Yi had no choice. She could only choose the former. Bai Yi thought Li Daochong was dead for sure. But this young man overturned her judgment. He took the 3 death fire puppets head-on. Chapter 288. It was naturally better that Li Daochong was fine. Bai Yi focused on dealing with the Ghost King. Although the White Phoenix Silk Belt was not a mystical spirit treasure, it was not far from it. The Ghost King was bound by the White Phoenix Silk Belt and could not break free. Bai Yi pointed with her slender finger, and the image of a white phoenix took shape above the Ghost King's head. Phoenixes were the king of spirit birds and were a natural counter to dark ghosts. When the white phoenix took shape, the The Ghost King revealed a look of shock and frantically struggled to break free from the White Phoenix silk belt. However, no matter how hard the Ghost King tried, the white belt did not budge at all. Occasionally, a golden light flashed past, constantly depleting the death aura on the Ghost King's body. A phoenix cry rang out. The image of the White Phoenix swooped down and penetrated the Ghost King's dark body. Roar! The Ghost King let out a roar of fear. The materialized dark body gradually dissipated and turned into a dark body. The death aura on the Ghost King's body continued to weaken. On the other side, Old Gun was gradually suppressing the vengeful bones. Every time the heaven bell hammer struck, the black flames on the vengeful bones would weaken a little. The situation gradually shifted to the side, and Li Daocheng's side gained the upper hand. After Li Daocheng landed, he immediately adjusted his aura and began to heal himself. The head-on clash with the dark fire puppet had caused him considerable injuries. The blood in his body churned, and he spat out a mouthful of blood. Fortunately, his foundation was not injured. Although his injuries were serious, he would recover after a few days of recuperation and taking spirit medicine. However, Li Daocheng's combat strength had already been reduced. If he attacked again, his injuries would worsen. Thus, he could only become a spectator and could not participate in the battle. Old Gun and Bai Yi were Jin Dan cultivators. Once they seized the initiative, they naturally would not give the vengeful bones and the Ghost King any chance. Old Gun roared, and the heaven bell hammer grew several times larger. With a boom, it fell from the sky and smashed the vengeful bones to smithereens. Old Gun shot out a ball of yang fire from his hand and burned the resentful bone to ashes. At the same time, Bai Yi's rites of Phoenix had already corroded the Ghost King's dark body into a ghost body. Golden flames ignited on the white ribbon. However, any flame, as long as it was of the yang attribute, was the bane of the dark ghost. The Ghost King's body writhed violently in the flames, still struggling for its life. After dealing with the vengeful bones, the panting Old Gun did not stop and immediately helped Bai Yi. The sky bell hammer flew towards the Ghost King. Boom! The Ghost King's body was smashed into pieces. Bai Yi added another dose of strength. The White Phoenix silk ribbon suddenly contracted like a python, and the Ghost King's ghost body instantly collapsed. Huff! Huff! Bai Yi's small mouth was wide open as she gasped for breath. Killing the Ghost King had drained her a little. Even a Jin Dan cultivator would expend a great deal of energy to completely kill a dark ghost that had formed a dark body. As for the four people who were still alive, their tense hearts finally relaxed a little. Li Xuemei sat down on the ground, her face pale. She spat out a mouthful of blood and looked to be on the verge of collapse. Old Gun sat on a stone stool, looking very tired. There wasn't much spirit chi left in his body. Even the spirit recovery liquid was of no help. Bai Yi barely managed to stand, her delicate body trembling slightly. She was the only one who hadn't suffered any injuries, but she was so exhausted that she didn't even have the strength to walk. Although Li Daocheng was injured, he was the one in the best condition. This was due to the spirit chi transformed by the blood spirit upgrader. It was extremely pure and dense, allowing him to endure much more than the average cultivator. The four of them looked at each other speechlessly. They each recuperated and tried to recover some of their strength as quickly as possible. The undying soul coffin was right in front of them, but they still felt uneasy. Fellow Taoist Bai, do you have a way to remove the barrier? Old Gun sat on the stone stool and took a deep breath. He tried to maintain a steady tone as he asked, "If I can recover to my peak state, I can try. But there's no way I can do it now," Bai Yi replied, breathing heavily. "How long will it take for you to fully recover?" Old Gun continued to ask, his tiger-like eyes looking in the direction of the undying soul coffin. "At least 2 days." As soon as Bai Yi finished speaking, creak! A bone-chilling sound of friction suddenly rang out in the silent cave. The four people's hearts skipped a beat. They looked in the direction of the sound at the same time. The undying soul coffin's lid moved horizontally, revealing a gap. A terrifying death chi came out from inside. The hair on the four people's bodies stood on end. With another creak, the lid moved horizontally a little more. Creak, creak, creak. The lid opened faster and faster. Thump! The lid of the undying soul coffin fell from the stone stool with a heavy thud. The four people's hearts were in their throats, as if they were facing a great enemy. Li Daocheng was almost suffocated by the terrifying death qi that was leaking out. He had never felt such a feeling before. Li Daocheng had always been very calm when facing dark ghosts. Even if he encountered stronger ones, or even stronger ones, he would not feel any fear. However, in front of this aura of death, Li Daocheng actually felt a sense of fear when he got on the sedan chair. The death qi was too powerful. Just how powerful was it? Li Daocheng could not say for sure. This feeling had only appeared once in his memory. When he was about 10 years old, Li Tianyang took him to Kangwu Star to participate in the cultivation summit of the Fourth Ring Starfield. The minimum requirement to participate in the summit was peak foundation establishment. There was no upper limit. Before the summit began, there would be a pre-summit press conference. Li Tianyang was not a reporter, but in order to broaden Li Daocheng's horizons, he took his son with him to take a look. The spokespersons for the summit were 3 high-level members of the Fourth Ring Starfield's Association of Cultivators. The reporters' questions were rather sharp. Some reporters insinuated that the Fourth Ring Starfield's Association of Cultivators was not doing anything and that it was better to disband. These words enraged one of the spokespersons. The moment he retracted his aura and released it, more than half of the people present felt their legs go weak. Li Daocheng was still a child. His spirit meridians had dried up and he had fainted on the spot. Fortunately, Li Tianyang had left in time and channeled spirit qi into Li Daocheng's body to wake him up. Later, Li Daocheng learned from Li Tianyang that the spokesperson was a Yuanian cultivator. The death qi emanating from the undying soul coffin was only stronger than the pressure released by the spokesperson. The difference was that one was spirit qi, while the other was death qi. For human cultivators, the latter was obviously more lethal. Old Gun and Bai Yi had just gone through a great battle. Their bodies were in the air, and Old Gun was injured. The death qi's pressure caused the 2 Jin Dan cultivators to spit out a mouthful of blood at the same time. Li Xuemei was in an even better state. Her body tilted to the side, and she remained motionless as if she were dead. The coffin lid opened, and the death qi soared to the sky. Just when they thought that some terrifying existence would slowly sit up from the coffin, there was nothing else. Several minutes later, the undying soul coffin remained motionless, as if there was nothing inside. Leaving the unconscious Li Xuemei aside, the 3 people looked at each other in dismay, not knowing what was going on. Li Daocheng was the only one who could still move. Gritting his teeth, Li Daocheng took out Song Ink and stepped onto the stone platform. He carefully approached the undying soul coffin to see what was lying inside. If the existence inside had not awakened, Li Daocheng would burn it with yang fire. Just when Li Daocheng was about to see the situation inside the coffin, a gap suddenly opened above the coffin. A giant hand reached out from inside and grabbed the coffin. In that instant, the soul coffin stood upright. Li Daocheng saw that what lay inside was not some terrifying nether ghost, but a breathtakingly beautiful young girl. However, her face was as pale as a sheet of paper, without a trace of blood. The undying soul coffin was quickly sucked into the spatial gap. Just as the soul coffin was about to enter, Li Daocheng felt a chill run down his spine. The young girl inside suddenly opened her eyes. Her demonic red pupils stared coldly at Li Daocheng, and she opened her small mouth. A faint female voice sounded in Li Daocheng's ears. "Human cultivator, you almost destroyed my soul. Very good. I will come looking for you." With a short sentence, the soul coffin was dragged into the spatial gap by the giant hand. Chapter 289. Li Daocheng sat in the cultivation room provided by Tseng Jiao in the underground city. He slowly opened his eyes. The top-quality spiritual liquid in the spiritual liquid tank had been changed 7 times in 3 days. At this time, it was already in a dry state. Most of it had been absorbed by Li Daocheng's body. It had been 3 days since the end of the matter. Li Daocheng's injuries had healed, and his cultivation level had improved. Sung Jiao unconditionally provided Li Daocheng with recovery and cultivation liquids. Li Daocheng was already close to the peak of the early stage of foundation establishment. If he could absorb one more red shadow malicious spirit, he would be able to level up. 3 days ago, when the undying soul coffin was grabbed by the giant hand into the space gap, the 4 survivors made some adjustments and left separately. Li Xuemei's injuries were not serious. Li Daocheng asked her what she planned to do in the future. Li Xuemei looked very depressed. She was very unnatural when facing Li Daocheng. She only said that she planned to go back to Blue Bay Star and return to the Li family. Li Xuemei had no other place to go. After all, the Li family was her mother's home. Her parents and relatives were all in Blue Bay Star. After these few years of torment, Li Xuemei's spirit was almost gone. Her ambitions from before had long been worn out. All that was left was loneliness. Li Xuemei knew that it would be impossible for her to squeeze into the circle of cultivators in the future. Yi and Fei died together with Li Xuemei. The Yi family would definitely investigate the reason. Yi and Fei was considered one of the top geniuses among the young people of the Yi family. His death was not a small loss to the Yi family. They would lose a bloodline power inheritance. For a moment, Li Xuemei wanted to beg Li Daocheng to take her in. However, when the words came to her mouth, she couldn't say it. In fact, if Li Xuemei really said such words, Li Daocheng would look down on her and wouldn't take her in. If you knew this would happen, you wouldn't have done it in the first place. The path you chose, you have to finish it even if you have to kneel. Li Xuemei bought a shuttle to Blue Bay Star on the same day. She dragged her tired and lonely back to Blue Bay Star. Her life had already been decided at this moment. Bai Yi was very interested in Li Daocheng. Before she left, she invited Li Daocheng to join Tianhua Cultivation Company. He also promised that as long as Li Daocheng agreed to join, he could guarantee that Li Daocheng would become one of the shareholders of Tianhua Cultivation Company, become one of the directors, and hold the position of deputy general manager. Li Daocheng refused without even thinking about it. The reason was very simple. Before he graduated, he would not join any cultivation company. Li Daocheng wasn't interested in joining the military, and he didn't like entering the government either. He couldn't handle the interpersonal relationships there. What Li Daocheng was most interested in was entering a good cultivation company and developing high-level talismans. This was very similar to his job as a programmer in his previous life. Being a spirit sequencer was Li Daocheng's career goal, so before he graduated from university, Li Daocheng didn't plan on applying for the job. Plans couldn't keep up with changes. Li Daocheng still needed to understand the various cultivation companies in the Federation in many ways. Moreover, he hadn't obtained the Spirit Sequencer certification yet. He wasn't even an apprentice Spirit Sequencer. Without the certification, no one would know if you were capable or not, and you wouldn't be recognized. The Great Cultivation Era was an era where one needed to obtain a large number of cultivation certifications. Refining weapons required a weapon refiner certification, and refining medicine required a medicine refiner certification. It was the same for spirit sequencers. The classification of these 3 professions was very similar. They all started from the apprentice level, and from low to high, they were 3rd class, 2nd class, 1st class, special class, 1-star, 2-star, 3-star. 7 grades. Being able to obtain a special class certification was already quite impressive. Star levels were godlike in any profession. Li Daocheng had his own plans, so naturally, he wouldn't agree to Bai Yi's invitation. Li Daocheng didn't expect that Bai Yi was also the vice chairman of Tianhua Cultivation Company's board of directors while being a patrol officer. Tianhua Cultivation Company was definitely a leading enterprise on Scarlet Sun Planet. It was much more powerful than the 4 big families. In the Great Cultivation Era, the most powerful local power had never been the family clans, but the large cultivation companies. However, the large cultivation companies wouldn't focus on a 4th-class cultivation planet. Regardless of whether it was Blue Bay Star or Scarlet Sun Planet, the large cultivation companies wouldn't pay attention to them. A fourth-class cultivation planet was equivalent to a fourth-class or fifth-class county. That bit of profit wasn't enough to attract the attention of the large cultivation companies. Therefore, on a fourth-class cultivation planet, the family clans were the local tyrants and had a more dominant role. That was because the large cultivation companies didn't participate at all. They didn't want to play with mud and **T. Tianhua Cultivation Company was considered a leading enterprise on Scarlet Sun Planet, but in the entire Fourth Ring Star Zone, it was just a small shrimp. Compared to the Yunyao Federation's top 100 companies, it was far inferior. Li Daocheng's target was Planet Canwell. Why would he stay at a cultivation company on Planet Scarlet Sun? Bai Yi was clearly a little unhappy after being rejected. A dignified Jindan cultivator had been rejected by a young brat. No matter how you put it, she felt a little embarrassed. But there was nothing she could do. When it came to status, Bai Yi might not necessarily be higher than Li Daocheng. After all, student Li Daocheng had won first place in the direct test and obtained the direct pass card, obtaining the qualification to directly take the final test of the 100 schools joint examination. There were only 1,000 spots in the entire Fourth Ring Star Zone for this. Li Daocheng's final results were unknown. Perhaps it would be very difficult for him to get into the Big Four, but entering the top 100 schools in the Federation was already a foregone conclusion. With his status, Li Daocheng was on equal footing with Bai Yi as a university student from a famous school. Bai Yi's status as a fourth-class cultivation planet's patrolman was only on par with a university student from a famous school. Her potential was already negligible, while the latter's potential was limitless and limitless. However, Bai Yi was unwilling to give up. She thought about how even a big shot like Qin Zhan had been unable to recruit Li Daocheng, let alone her. Thus, Bai Yi quickly gave up on the idea of recruiting Li Daocheng. Instead, she decided to befriend him and gave Li Daocheng a spirit-nurturing pill. Li Daocheng didn't refuse. It would be a waste if he didn't take it. Besides, he also needed to treat his injuries. 3 days passed. Li Daocheng's injuries had healed, and his cultivation had become even more solid. There was still a week before the joint examination of 100 schools. Li Daocheng had originally planned to use the remaining time to study the Great Void Sword technique and prepare to make level 10 spirit talismans. Li Daocheng wanted to be fully prepared for the joint examination so that he could meet any challenges. However, after reading the Great Void Sword technique, Li Daocheng still gave up on cultivating it immediately. He only needed to select Confirm on the holographic window of the Hot-Blooded Upgrader. Then, he could immediately finish cultivating the technique. After much deliberation, Li Daocheng finally gave up. When he had first cultivated the 9-crack saber technique, he had almost been unable to bear it. The Great Void Sword technique was so powerful that Li Daocheng was worried that if he couldn't bear it and couldn't recover in 7 days, he wouldn't be able to take part in the joint examination of 100 schools, or he wouldn't be able to maintain his best condition and fail the exam. That would be the end of him. To be on the safe side, Li Daocheng temporarily gave up on cultivating. Then, Li Daocheng threw himself into making level 10 spirit talismans, but the results were similarly unsuccessful. The materials for making level 10 spirit talismans couldn't be bought at all. Li Daocheng's multi-pronged approach was also useless. Sung Jiao, Third Master Yin, and Lu Xingyuan all said that they couldn't get their hands on them. Not only were these materials rare, but they were also strictly controlled by the Federation's Security Bureau and were considered strategic resources. The key materials for making level 10 and above spirit talismans were extremely rare, similar to the materials used to make hydrogen bombs on Earth. Level 10 and above spirit talismans were too powerful and were considered weapons of mass destruction. If they weren't strictly controlled, it would be a mess. Level 10 spirit talismans were still alright, but level 15 spirit talismans could destroy an entire city. It wasn't that there weren't any ways to get the materials for making level 10 spirit talismans, but they could only go through official channels. One was to become a member of a large military enterprise. Another was to become a research fellow of the Federation's Cultivation Research Institute. And the last was to become a member of the Spirit Sequencer Association and obtain a special grade Spirit Sequencer certification. Li Daocheng also learned from Qian Shanghai that if he obtained a third-grade Spirit Sequencer certification before the joint examination of 100 schools, he would get bonus points for the examination. Li Daocheng didn't want to waste the last 7 days, so he immediately headed to the Spirit Sequencer Association's office building in Scarlet Sun City. The building where the Spirit Sequencer Association was located was majestic and dazzling. It wasn't very tall, only about 30 stories high, but it was superior to the other 2 buildings that were 60 to 70 stories high. The exterior glass of the entire building was actually made of star soul crystals, which were priceless. A palm-sized star soul crystal cost 10 million Federation dollars. The entire exterior of the building was made of them. How rich must one be to be able to afford it? Star soul crystals were a higher grade than pan silver, which was the basic or used to make Dharma treasures. Its hardness and toughness were 1 grade higher than pan silver. Chapter 290. Li Daocheng had never thought of participating in the Spirit Sequencer certification. After all, one's identity had to be verified. Li Daocheng didn't want to show his face too much. It was fine as long as he knew how to make spirit talismans. With the memories of his previous life and the hot-blooded upgrader, Li Daocheng was very confident in making spirit talismans. He wasn't worried that he would encounter too many difficulties. Thus, he had never thought of joining the Spirit Sequencer Association. Since he couldn't buy the materials he wanted, he had no choice but to take the certification test. Li Daocheng entered the Spirit Sequencer building. The reception area was on the first floor, and there was an endless stream of people coming and going. Some were here to buy materials, some to buy spirit talismans, some to learn, but most of them were here for the certification test. The Spirit Sequencer certification test was held every day. As long as one had the ability, it wouldn't be a problem to get 3 stars in a day. Of course, such a situation had never happened before. The fastest record in the Federation was Spiritual Talisman Sage from 300 years ago. He became a special grade Spirit Sequencer in a day. At that time, it was shocking and became a much-told story in the Federation. Spiritual Talisman Sage's attainment in making spirit talismans was unsurpassed. The only level, 25 spirit talisman in the history of the Shenghua Federation was made by Spiritual Talisman Sage. Spiritual Talisman Sage had entered the Soul Formation realm 150 years ago and was one of the core figures in the Shenghua Federation's Central Starfield. He was also the only 2-star spirit sequencer in the Shenghua Federation. Spiritual Talisman Sage's spirit talismans were very powerful. He had made many contributions at the Federation's borders and was a key target that Hades wanted to assassinate. Spiritual Talisman Sage was ranked 10th on Hades' kill list. To the Federation, a person like Spiritual Talisman Sage was a treasure that couldn't be touched by Hades. This showed how important the spirit sequencer profession was. Li Daocheng followed the sign and went to the 2nd floor. This was the certification office. Registration, consultation, and certification were all done on this floor. According to the sign, Li Daocheng walked to an open office area. A counter separated the inside from the outside. Behind the counter sat several female staff members in the same uniform. Their Taoist robes were all heaven-grade Taoist robes. Li Daocheng was also surprised when he saw this. Even now, he didn't have a decent Taoist robe. Most of Li Daocheng's wealth and resources were used to make talismans. He didn't have any spare money to buy Taoist robes. However, he still needed it. If he could wear a peak heaven rank magic robe, Li Daocheng's defense would rise to another level. Li Daocheng glanced at the office and saw that there were quite a lot of people. There were a few beautiful attendants who were extremely busy. There were quite a lot of people who wanted to become a spirit sequencer. Li Daocheng didn't join the queue. He didn't have any level at the moment, so he walked towards the platform. There was also a beautiful waitress standing there. Wang Jing had always been very proud of her job. It was a respectable job, and there were countless people who came to her for help every day. Many of them were descendants of large families, and there were also many talented youngsters who came to her for help. Wang Jing had also obtained the Apprentice Spirit Sequencer certification through her own efforts. Her status was very different. Spirit Sequencers were very popular in the Federation. Even Apprentice Spirit Sequencers were very popular. Apprentice Spirit Sequencers could make Level 2 talismans. Low-grade talismans could be mass-produced through spiritual brains, but their effects couldn't be compared to Level 2 talismans made by humans. Spirit Sequence runes weren't only used on talismans. They were used in almost the entire cultivation industry, especially low-grade Spirit Sequence runes. Taoist robes, flying shuttles, and all the daily necessities produced by cultivation technology required Spirit Sequence runes. Apprentice Spirit Sequencers were high-level technicians in the production of these things. There was a huge shortage of manpower. Almost every cultivation company was hiring such talents every day. With a monthly salary, no one dared to ask for 30,000 Federation coins. This was definitely a high-paying job at the grassroots level. Wang Jing had already noticed Li Daochong when he entered the office. She would meet hundreds of such youngsters every day. Most of them came to ask about how to become a Spirit Sequencer. Many of them would brag about how amazing they were. They were very knowledgeable. Not to mention Level 1 and Level 2 talismans, they could even make Level 5 and 6 talismans easily. In short, they were very impressive. When Wang Jing first started this job, she really believed the words of these youngsters. But after seeing them for a while, she became numb. All of them bragged without thinking. Other than being good at talking, they were nothing. If she took them to the assessment, they would be exposed. 500 people went through the certification every day, and less than 3 passed. Spirit Sequence programming wasn't something that could be done casually. Not only did it require precise control of psychokinesis, but it also required a deep understanding and control of the subtle changes in spirit energy. Other than these 2 requirements, there was also creativity. Of course, this was a requirement for making high-grade talismans. If one could fulfill these 3 requirements, it wouldn't be a problem for them to become a Level 2 Spirit Sequencer. Unfortunately, many people didn't even fulfill the first 2 requirements and came to get the certification. After all, with an Apprentice Spirit Sequencer certification, they would be able to find a high-paying job. Many people wanted to bluff their way through, but the Spirit Sequencer Association was a strict certification department that definitely wouldn't let those ignorant and incompetent people pass. If they wanted to get the certification, they would have to show their true abilities. Li Daochong looked like he was only 18 or 19 years old. At this age, he hadn't even started cultivating. It was simply a fool's dream if he wanted to become a Spirit Sequencer. Wang Jing's talent wasn't bad. She studied at Scarlet Sun University's Spirit Sequencer Institute. After graduating, she applied to work at Scarlet Sun Planet's Spirit Sequencer Association. She only received the certification for Apprentice Spirit Sequencer after 2 years. It was obvious how difficult it was to become a Spirit Sequencer. Thus, when Wang Jing saw Li Daochong walking towards her, her beautiful eyes immediately revealed traces of contempt. She even felt a little impatient. She wasn't willing to waste her time on these youngsters who only knew how to dream. It wasn't wrong for them to want to become a Spirit Sequencer, but if they didn't work hard and wanted to eat seedless dates, then that was their fault. Li Daochong didn't know what Wang Jing was thinking. He walked closer and asked, "Hello, may I ask where the Level 3 Spirit Sequencer certification is?" Level 3 Spirit Sequencer certification? Wang Jing immediately felt a phantom line behind her head. Why didn't you just directly say that you could become a Level 1 Spirit Sequencer? Wang Jing had seen many youngsters like this who wanted to show off their strength the moment they met her. They just wanted to raise their status by saying that. In reality, they didn't know anything. Li Daochong didn't think too much about it. He didn't know that there was such a thing as an Apprentice Spirit Sequencer and thought that the lowest certification would start from Level 3. That was why he asked that question. Wang Jing had just received a great swindler, so her patience had long run out. When she heard the young man in front of her asking about the 3rd-class Spirit Sequencer certification, she replied coldly, "Do you have the certification for an Apprentice Spirit Sequencer?" Li Daochong was stunned for a moment before he replied, "No." As expected, Wang Jing's expression turned even colder. "If you don't, why are you asking about level 3 spirit sequencer? You haven't even learned how to crawl, and you want to run?" Li Daochong saw that this woman's tone was stiff, and her expression wasn't good. He frowned slightly. "I don't understand, so I came to ask. Isn't this a place for consultations?" Wang Jing immediately said, "Young man, you should ask some constructive questions. You don't even know these common-sense questions, and you immediately ask where the level 3 spirit sequencer certification is. Are you trying to make a fool of yourself?" Li Daochong's unhappy expression eased slightly. He felt that what she said made sense, and that his question was a little abrupt. Thus, he asked again, "Then where is the apprentice spirit sequencer certification? Can you bring me there?" Wang Jing controlled her temper and continued to ask, "Which university did you graduate from?" Li Daochong replied, "I haven't graduated yet. I'm currently in my 2nd year of university." Wang Jing glared at him. "You're in your 2nd year of university?" She added in her heart, "Brat, where did you get your confidence from? You're only in your 2nd year of university, and you're already here for the certification? Which school?" Wang Jing had been working for many years and was still strict. If he was a student from a famous school, it would be understandable. "Beiyang University," Li Daochong replied truthfully. "Beiyang University?" Wang Jing repeated in a low voice. Then, she looked at Li Daochong as if she was looking at an idiot. Wang Jing had heard of this university before. It was the worst cultivation school on Scarlet Sun Planet. Some time ago, it was rumored that the Ministry of Education was going to remove it. "You're in your 2nd year of university? Who the hell gave you the courage to walk into the Spirit Sequencer Association's building and ask me where the 3rd grade Spirit Sequencer assessment is held? Are you King kidding me?" Chapter 291. Is there a problem? Li Daochong asked when he saw Wang Jing looking at him with an unfriendly gaze. "There's no problem, but are you sure you want to take the Apprentice Spirit Sequencer Certification test?" Wang Jing asked coldly. "I'm sure." Li Daochong nodded. The Apprentice Spirit Sequencer Certification test usually requires a bachelor's degree. If you don't have it, you can still take it, but you will be punished accordingly. The association did this to save manpower. Otherwise, everyone would be able to take the exam without any restrictions. The association's building would explode from the overcrowding. Therefore, those without a degree will have a chance to take the exam, but if you fail, it will be troublesome. Wang Jing spoke bluntly. Although Wang Jing didn't like these youngsters who wanted to eat seedless dates, she still had to make things clear. Otherwise, she would be neglecting her job. If not, she wouldn't have gone through so much trouble to explain and would have just brought the youngster in for the test. As for the consequences, it was none of her business. "What's the punishment?" Li Daochong asked casually. "You are not allowed to take the Apprentice Spirit Sequencer Certification test for 5 years. You will also have to pay the association 1 million Federation coins as a service fee." Wang Jing replied directly. The association's rule seemed overbearing, but it was actually because they had no other choice. In the past, there was no such rule. Everyone would take the exam, but the association didn't have that many teachers to take the exam. Every spirit sequencer's time was precious. If the examinees were serious, it would be fine. But most of them overestimated their abilities. They would waste their time working as a spirit sequencer in the association. If they had the time, they might as well do research and create spirit talismans. Therefore, the association set this rule, which calmed down the craze for the exam. "Will there be no punishment if I pass the exam?" Li Daochong asked again. "If you pass the exam, you will be an apprentice spirit sequencer. Of course, there will be no punishment." Wang Jing's tone was very stiff, but she was thinking in her heart, "Kid, you still want to pass the exam? Stop dreaming." "Oh, I know." Li Daochong paused and continued. "Can I skip the Apprentice Spirit Sequencer Certification test and take the 3rd class Spirit Sequencer Certification test directly?" "What?" The look in Wang Jing's eyes, as if she was looking at an idiot, became even more intense. She had said so much to this kid. Was this guy deaf, or was his brain flooded with water? Of course you can. But if you skip the assessment and fail, the punishment will be even more severe. You won't be able to take part in the Spirit Sequence Master Assessment for 10 years, and you will have to pay a service fee of 5 million, Wang Jing replied coldly. Please bring me to the 3rd grade Spirit Sequencer certification test, Li Daochong said. Have you thought it through? Wang Jing was stunned for a moment. She did not expect this kid to not hesitate at all after knowing the punishment. I'm here to take the test. There's no need to think about it, Li Daochong replied indifferently. Don't need to think. Sure. Wang Jing was infuriated for no reason. She had put in a lot of effort to get her apprentice spirit sequencer certification. She was born in a famous school and had a degree. After she started working, she humbly sought guidance. She worked during the day and read books at night. She also practiced creating spirit talismans. He had only obtained his apprentice spirit sequencer certification at the age of 25, which was considered fast among normal people. Wang Jing could not stand people who overestimated themselves. She looked at Li Daochong with disdain and said, "Follow me." Li Daochong followed Wang Jing to the 3rd floor. This floor was where the apprentice spirit sequencer certification test was held. Anyone who wanted to become an apprentice spirit sequencer would have to take the test on this floor. Although the Spirit Sequencer Association had set the punishment, there were still many people who came to take the apprentice spirit sequencer certification test every day. However, most of them were college graduates who met the requirements. There were fewer people like Li Daochong who were studying or working in society who did not have anything. There were no less than 100 people who came to take the certification test every day. The Apprentice Spirit Sequencer Certification Test was much simpler than the official Spirit Sequencer Certification Test. It only consisted of a written test and a basic question and answer. The written test was mainly to see if the examinee's knowledge was broad enough. It was all about rote memorization. For example, the composition of the spirit brain, what the spirit-based language was, what to take note of in spirit sequencer programming, etc. These were all basic knowledge that a qualified spirit sequencer needed to know. If one did not even know what a spirit brain was and how to use it, it would be impossible for them to become a spirit sequencer. Wang Jing brought Li Daochong to the waiting hall on the 3rd floor. There were more than 10 people waiting for the next certification test. Wang Jing only told Li Daochong to wait here, and then walked to the office next door that had the words Special Assistant written on it with a displeased expression. Outside the office, Wang Jing's face was still cold. When she raised her hand and knocked on the door, a bright smile immediately appeared on her face. Su Xianro was the granddaughter of Su Chongxing, the president of the Spirit Sequencer Association on planet Scarlet Sunday. She was in her 3rd year of university and was the pride of Scarlet Sun University's Spirit Sequencer Institute. She had passed the 3rd grade Spirit Sequencer certification test at the age of 20. She was the only young person on planet Scarlet Sun who had passed the certification test before graduating from university. Last year, Su Xianro was able to create a level 4 spirit talisman on her own without any assistance. Her success rate was 90%. This was an extremely shocking achievement. Not many people in the 4th ring star zone could achieve this. Su Xianro went to school while working at the Spirit Sequencer Association. With her amazing talent, she used only a year to go from a temporary assistant to a special grade assistant. Being a Spirit Sequencer's assistant was also a respectable job. A temporary assistant could only do odd jobs. A normal assistant was slightly more advanced, but there was also a limit to how much they could do. Their main job was to help the trainee Spirit Sequencer move things and organize things. A 3rd grade assistant was 1 rank higher and could help a 3rd grade Spirit Sequencer. At this time, they could learn something. A 2nd grade assistant could help a 2nd grade Spirit Sequencer. A 1st grade assistant could help a 1st grade Spirit Sequencer, and so on. A special grade assistant could naturally help a special grade Spirit Sequencer. Su Xianro was the only special grade assistant on planet Scarlet Sunday. In fact, in the entire 4th ring star zone, there were only a few special grade assistants. Su Xianro was hailed as the next spiritual talisman sage. Although she was not as stunning as spiritual talisman sage, She had a meticulousness and calmness that spiritual talisman sage did not have. Su Xianro was also one of the few students on planet Scarlet Sun who had directly entered the 100 schools joint examination. Su Xianro's status was slightly higher than a normal second-grade spirit sequencer. Under normal circumstances, Su Xianro would not be in charge of the trainee spirit sequencer assessment. But today, there was a shortage of manpower, so Su Xianro was called here by her grandfather before he died to take over. Wang Jing had purposely looked for Su Xianro. She should have brought Li Daochong to the 4th floor. The 3rd floor was the trainee assessment area, while the 4th floor was the 3rd-grade assessment area. However, Wang Jing was not so stupid. If she really mindlessly brought this young man who had nothing to do to the 4th floor to participate in the 3rd-grade assessment, she would definitely be scolded to death by Elder Gua. "You little girl, don't you know that my time is very precious? If you bring any random person who wants to participate in the 3rd-grade assessment to me, won't I die from exhaustion?" Wang Jing could imagine how Elder Gua would scold her. But after informing her of the punishment, this young man had already requested to participate in the 3rd-grade assessment. Wang Jing had no choice but to bring him along. Otherwise, it would be a dereliction of duty. Wang Jing did not dare to directly go to the 4th floor, as she was afraid of being scolded. However, she really could not stand these young people. Each one of them was more pretentious than the other. She had chased away one after another. If she did not create a big commotion to intimidate this group of young people, there would be no end to it. After thinking about it, Wang Jing could only think of Su Xianro. She was the only person on the 3rd floor who had the qualifications to participate in the 3rd-grade assessment. After interacting with her for a while, Wang Jing had a certain understanding of Su Xianro's temper. This proud daughter of heaven, who was both beautiful and intelligent, had an extremely strict and serious attitude towards creating spirit talismans. Su Xianro had an innate arrogance. Wang Jing knew that she was a woman who was destined to enter the Federation's central position. Wang Jing could not flip out at the examinees, but Su Xianro could. If she was really unhappy, she could slap those hotheads a few times and use low-grade spirit talismans to blast them out of the Spirit Sequencer Association building. No one would care. The treatment of geniuses was always a little special. Su Xianro was the most eye-catching genius on planet Crimson Sunday. For a 4th-grade planet like planet Crimson Sun to produce such a genius, it was hard to find one in 1,000 years. She was the hope of planet Crimson Sun to become a 3rd-grade cultivation planet. Wang Jing had purposely asked Su Xianro to test this batch of examinees to embarrass them. Su Xianro was usually a low-profile person and did not pay attention to the outside world. When creating intoxicating spirit talismans, she had the aura of an otherworldly fairy. However, Wang Jing had seen Su Xianro flip out before. It was as if she was a completely different person. At that time, there was a young man who thought highly of himself and acted pretentious in front of Su Xianro. Firstly, he wanted to win her heart, and secondly, he wanted to show off. Unfortunately, Su Xianro did not fall for it and took out a 4th-grade spirit talisman for the young man to see if it was real or fake. The young man took a few glances and said that it was fake. Su Xianro did not explain and took out the 4th-grade spirit talisman. The young man was sent flying out of the window with serious injuries. In the end, the matter was left unsettled. The Spirit Sequencer Association did not even pay for the medical fees, and the young man sued Su Xianro. In the end, the young man lost the case. The verdict was simple. He deserved it for looking for trouble. When Wang Jing knocked on the office door, Su Xianro was in the middle of drawing an array pattern in front of her spiritual brain. The knocking on the door interrupted Su Xianro's thoughts. She could not help but frown. Didn't I say not to look for me unless it was something important? Wang Jing, who was standing outside the door, hurriedly said, "Miss Su, I am sorry to disturb you. There's a young man who wants to skip the apprentice spirit sequencer exam and directly take the 3rd-grade spirit sequencer exam." Chapter 292. A few days ago, Su Xianro had come up with a new set of level 5 spirit runes. However, she was still stuck in the concept and couldn't put into practice. No matter how hard Su Xianro racked her brains, she couldn't figure out where the problem was. After dozens of simulations, she was still wrong. This caused her to be in a state of anxiety. Now that she heard that someone wanted to skip the exam, an inexplicable fire immediately rose in her heart. In the Federation's hundreds of years, the number of people who could take the exam could be counted on one hand. Even with her outstanding talent, she didn't dare to take the exam. Su Xianro wasn't just talented, she also had a grandfather who was a level 1 spirit sequencer. Even so, Su Xianro didn't dare to take the exam. She took it one step at a time. A few months ago, she passed the level 2 spirit sequencer exam and became the youngest level 2 spirit sequencer in the history of Scarlet Sun Planet. From this, it could be seen how difficult it was to get certified as a spirit sequencer. Now, someone wanted to take the exam. This wasn't just a matter of overestimating oneself. It was a challenge to the Spirit Sequencer Association's seriousness. Wang Jing pushed the door open and entered. Su Xianro's beautiful face was as cold as ice. She was obviously angry that someone wanted to take the exam. Who wants to take the exam? Su Xianro asked coldly. Assistant Su, he's a Year 2 student. He's not older than 19. Wang Jing replied honestly. A Year 2 student? Su Xianro was stunned. She then asked, what's his name? Wang Jing realized that she hadn't asked for the young man's name. Her heart skipped a beat. Assistant Su didn't seem to be in a good mood. She blamed herself for being careless. Forget it. I'm not interested in knowing the name of this kind of person. Are there any other apprentice spirit sequencer candidates that need to be tested today? Su Xianro's mood was extremely bad as she looked at the runes on the spirit vision screen. Yes, Assistant Su. Elder Gua is taking the level 3 spirit sequencer exam and doesn't have time for now. Those people outside have been waiting for the entire morning, Wang Jing replied. Seeing that Su Xianro didn't ask for the young man's name, she heaved a sigh of relief. Okay, let them go to the 3rd exam room. I'll be there in a while. Su Xianro rubbed her temples and said with her eyes closed. Okay, Wang Jing replied and walked out of the office. Normally, after a spirit sequencer apprentice went through a period of training and successfully created a level 3 spirit talisman, they would be able to take the level 3 spirit sequencer certification. Although they could register directly, to be safe, most people would choose to go through 1 or 2 tests and let the Spirit Sequencer Association decide if they could participate in the 3rd grade certification. At this moment, there were a few people sitting in the waiting room. 5 of them were here to take the 3rd grade Spirit Sequencer test. Wang Su was the most senior among the 5 of them. His talent was relatively higher, so he had the highest chance of passing the test. At the same time, he was also a fresh graduate of Scarlet Sun University's School of Spirit Sequence. Not long after he graduated, he passed the Apprentice Spirit Sequence examination. The Wang family could be considered as a prestigious family on the Scarlet Sun Star. However, the members of the Wang family did not have many achievements in cultivation. However, there were many talents in other professions. Blacksmiths, apothecaries, and spirit sequencers were all from the Wang family. Wang Su was the most talented member of the Wang family in recent generations. At the age of 23, he had a high chance of passing the 3rd grade spirit sequencer examination. This meant that Wang Su already had the ability to make level 4 talismans. As Wang Su often came to the Spirit Sequencer Association to purchase materials, many people knew him. They knew that he would soon become an official spirit sequencer. Therefore, the waiting room attracted a lot of attention. A few candidates would try to curry favor with him from time to time. If Wang Su passed the test, he would immediately take the test. Once he passed, he would become a 3rd grade spirit sequencer. This was because he always had a part-time job in the Spirit Sequencer Association. In the future, he had a high chance of becoming an apprentice spirit sequence instructor in the Spirit Sequencer Association. The benefits of having a good relationship with Wang Su were self-evident. Brother Wang, with your standard, there is no need for you to take the test. Passing the third-grade certification test is just a matter of minutes. A chubby young man tried to curry favor with him. Lu Dong, look at what you're saying. Do you think Brother Wong is like you, someone who does everything in a hurry and keeps a low profile? There's no doubt about Brother Wong's strength, but Brother Wong does things steadily. Do you understand? A square-faced young man at the side said with a lecturing look. That's right, that's right. Lu Dong scratched his head and laughed. Brother Wong, since we were able to take the test together today, we can be considered classmates. If there is anything I don't understand in the future, I will ask you for advice. Another candidate who looked slightly older said. Wang Su enjoyed the flattery. He smiled and did not say anything. In his heart, he was very happy. His small eyes would occasionally glance at the few female candidates sitting opposite him. They were the reason why he was in such a good mood. In his eyes, these people who were boasting about Wang Su were just a bunch of clowns. They could not be compared to him. If it were not for the presence of the female candidates, Wang Su would not have bothered with them. Of course, with the presence of the female candidates, it was a different story. This group of clowns became Wang Su's best advertisement. One or two female examinees would look at Wang Su from time to time. However, these female candidates were not worthy of Wang Su's attention. His target was Su Xinro, the woman who stood at the peak of Planet Scarlet Sunday. Compared to Su Xinro, these female candidates were just wild flowers and weeds by the roadside. They could only be picked and played with occasionally. As for other things, they were naturally not worth mentioning. With Wang Su's ability, passing the third-grade certification was something that could be done in a matter of minutes. Participating in the test was not as low-key as these people said. Wang Su only wanted to see Su Xinro. He had heard that Su Xinro was the invigilator for today's test. If not for this, Wang Su would not have bothered to participate in the test. With his ability, why would he need to go through so much trouble? Half a year ago, Wang Su was already able to create a level 4 spirit talisman, which was the minimum requirement for a third-grade spirit sequencer. For his age, he could be considered to have some talent. A few people surrounded Wang Su and tried to curry favor with him. They all wanted to leave a good impression in front of this young man who was about to become a third-grade spirit sequencer. Only Li Daochong sat at the side and silently flipped through the reports on the shelf beside him. Friend, are you also here to participate in the third-grade spirit sequencer test? Lu Dong had noticed Li Daochong when he was brought in by Wang Jing. Lu Dong did not want to let go of any opportunity to make friends with an expert. The young man in front of him looked to be around 18 or 19 years old. The childishness on his clean face had not completely faded away. If he was here to take the test as an apprentice spirit sequencer, his future would also be bright. No, Li Daochong replied simply. Oh, then are you here to take the apprentice spirit sequencer test? Lu Dong continued to ask awkwardly. His expression had already cooled down from his previous enthusiasm. If he was only here to take the apprentice spirit sequencer test, it would not be that amazing. At most, he could only say that he was not bad. Lu Dong was already an apprentice spirit sequencer. As long as he focused on his cultivation, it would not be a problem for him to pass the second-grade spirit sequencer test in a few decades. No, Li Daochong still replied with 2 words. He only glanced at Lu Dong when he asked the question. After that, his gaze never left the report in his hand. Li Daochong was not in the mood to chat with these people and flatter each other. He only wanted to take the test as soon as possible so that it would be convenient for him to purchase the materials needed to create a level 10 spirit talisman. When he heard that Wang Su was not here, and that was not here, Lu Dong's intention to make friends with him disappeared. His expression turned unfriendly. A fellow who had not even taken the apprentice spirit sequencer test was not even comparable to a pebble by the roadside in Lu Dong's eyes. Lu Dong was inexplicably angry. If you were a freaking awesome person, I would have accepted your attitude when talking to me. You are nothing, yet you still dare to act cool in front of me. I asked you a question, and you acted like you didn't care. Why? Are you putting on a front for me to see? No. If you're not an examinee, then why are you sitting in the waiting room? Lu Dong raised his voice by an octave. The waiting room was not big to begin with. The few of them were sitting together, so the conversation between Lu Dong and Li Daocheng was heard by everyone else. The few female examinees on the other side all looked at them strangely. However, they were not unhappy with Lu Dong's loud voice. Instead, they were looking at Li Daocheng strangely. Doesn't the Association of Spirit Sequencers have a rule that examinees are not allowed to occupy the waiting room? A girl asked softly. At the same time, she looked at the young man opposite her with disdain. That's right. There aren't many seats here, and there are many examinees standing outside. This fellow, on the other hand, didn't care about anything and just sat down. He didn't even ask if he had the right to sit here. How uncultured, another girl added. Li Daocheng did not expect the fatty sitting beside him to change his attitude faster than flipping a book. He had asked him a total of 3 questions. When he asked the first question, it could be described as flattering. After he answered the second question, his attitude was obviously cold, but it was still within the normal range. After he answered the second question, this damn fatty immediately made a 180-degree turn and directly shouted at him. How could he be so snobbish? Li Daocheng slowly closed the report and turned to look at Lu Dong. The latter felt a chill down his spine, and an invisible chill spread throughout his body. Lu Dong lowered his eyes and looked at Li Daocheng's exposed arm. It was neither thick nor thin, but very sturdy. He seemed to be a martial artist. Do you have a problem with that? Li Daocheng was too lazy to explain why he was sitting here. There was no need for him to do so. Li Daocheng did not release any pressure and kept his aura. The aura he released was only at Qi Refinement Stage 3. But even so, the aura of a Foundation Establishment cultivator would still affect ordinary people. Lu Dong subconsciously shivered. He felt strange, but he did not show it on his face. There were so many people watching, and there were even a few female examinees. If he showed his fear in front of a brat who was still wet behind the ears, how could he survive in the future? He was an apprentice spirit sequencer, and his status was not something an ordinary person could compare to. He did not believe that this brat would dare to make a move on him in the Association of Spirit Sequencers. Moreover, he was the one who broke the rules. It doesn't matter whether I have a problem with that or not. What's important is that the Association of Spirit Sequencers has a rule that only examinees can enter the waiting room to rest. Outsiders are not allowed to enter. Since you are not an examinee, please leave. Lu Dong stared at Li Daocheng with reason and pointed at the door. What are you arguing about? Don't you know that there is a silence rule on the examination floor? Chapter 293. Wang Jing glared at Lu Dong, who was about to scream. The latter shrunk his head and jumped in fright. It had seemed to have been a little too loud. However, Lu Dong quickly recovered. He pointed at Li Daocheng and hurriedly defended himself. Assistant Wang, this kid is not an examinee. He is openly occupying a seat in the waiting room. I couldn't stand it, and in a moment of desperation, I raised my voice a little. Please forgive me. Other than being a consultant, Wang Jing was also a third-grade assistant. Everyone who frequented the Spirit Sequencer Association knew who she was. Although Wang Jing didn't like Li Daocheng and wanted him to get into a fight with someone, she couldn't wait for him to be ridiculed so that she could reduce his arrogance. However, this young man didn't break any rules, so Wang Jing wouldn't say anything. When Wang Jing's gaze landed on Li Daocheng, the latter looked indifferent, but in Wang Jing's eyes, it was a provocation. Wang Jing was unhappy and didn't want to say anything. She just wanted to bring this bunch of people to the third examination room. However, after seeing Li Daocheng's expression, she changed her mind and said with a mocking tone, "This student is not only an examinee, but also an examinee who wants to take the third-grade examination. He is a second-year student and isn't even an apprentice spirit sequencer. Yet, he wants to take the third-grade examination. Do you think he has the right to sit here?" After Wang Jing finished speaking, everyone in the waiting room looked at Li Daocheng as if they were looking at an idiot. Taking the third-grade examination? No one on planet Crimson Sun had ever taken the third-grade examination. There might be some in the entire Federation, but on a low-grade cultivation planet like planet Crimson Sun, there definitely wasn't one. Taking the third-grade examination? How can there be such an arrogant person in this world? Did this kid eat the wrong medicine? He is studying in a university and doesn't even have a degree. Even if he is here to take the apprentice examination, there is a huge risk. If he doesn't pass, he will be severely punished. Isn't taking the third-grade examination just giving money to the association and destroying his own future? He wants to. What do you do about it? It's been a long time since the Spirit Sequencer Association has had such an ignorant fool. Regardless of whether I pass the test or not, there's going to be a good show to watch. There was a lot of discussion in the surroundings. Everyone looked at Li Daocheng with a bit of ridicule in their eyes, as if they were waiting for a good show. Li Daocheng's expression was indifferent. He turned a blind eye to the gazes cast at him from all directions. When Wang Jing heard the reactions around her, she looked very satisfied. She paused for a moment before saying, "The examinees who are participating in the third-class test today, come with me. You too." Wang Jing pointed at Li Daocheng. The latter immediately stood up and walked out of the waiting room. A few examinees were led by Wang Jing to the largest waiting room on the third floor. There were over 10 tables inside. On each table, there was a spiritual computer, a recording device, various materials for making spiritual talismans, and more than 10 kinds of talisman paper. These were all required for the assessment. Apart from that, there was also a spiritual tablet testing device that looked very high-tech. It was about 1 meter tall and 2 meters wide. This device was used to test the sensitivity and precision of the examinee's spiritual sense. After entering the third testing room, the examinees consciously pushed Li Daocheng aside. They gathered on one side, while Li Daocheng stood on the other side. Li Daocheng didn't mind. He chose a seat in the corner and sat down to rest. After succeeding in foundation establishment, Li Daocheng's temperament became even more stable. Why would he bother with these ordinary people's childish behavior? If Li Daocheng wanted to, with just a wave of his pressure, these people would all kneel on the ground and not be able to stand up. Wang Jing briefly explained the things to take note of during the test. Then, she sat on the podium and began to tidy up the items, waiting for Su Xianro to arrive. After a few minutes, Su Xianro arrived in a white robe. Her beautiful face carried a bit of coldness. When Wang Su saw Su Xianro, his eyes widened and he almost drooled. A few months ago, when Wang Su saw Su Xianro for the first time, he was infatuated with this heavenly goddess and thought about her day and night. In Wang Su's heart, the only person on planet Scarlet Sun that was worthy of Su Xianro was him. No one else was worthy of this goddess. Wang Su had absolute confidence in his future as a spirit sequencer. In less than 10 years, he would definitely become a first-grade spirit sequencer. He, Wang Su, and Su Xianro were a match made in heaven. After Su Xianro entered, she glanced at the examinees below the podium and said to Wang Jing, "Give them the written test papers first." Wang Jing nodded and gave the papers to the examinees. "You have 15 minutes to answer the questions. They're all very simple questions. If you don't even know these questions, then don't think about taking the third-grade spirit sequencer test. The time starts now," Su Xianro said casually. That, Li Daocheng suddenly opened his mouth. "If you have anything to say it after you finish the paper." Su Xianro frowned. She was a little dissatisfied with this young man who didn't know the rules. Didn't he know that the examination room needed to be quiet? "I'm not here to take the pre-test. I want to take the third-grade test directly." Li Daocheng didn't want to go through the extra procedure and said, "Assistant Wang told me to come over. For you, this is the third-grade test. If you finish the paper and get full marks, you can proceed to the next test. If you miss a mark, you will have to pay 5 million Federation coins as a service fee. Also, you will not be allowed to take any Spirit Sequencer certification test for the next 10 years. Su Xianro said coldly. "Oh." When Li Daocheng heard this, he responded and immediately lowered his head to answer the paper seriously. Half of the questions on the paper were basic questions, while the other half were slightly more advanced questions. They were related to the knowledge of spirit-based programming. These questions were too easy for Li Daocheng. Back in Xiansan University, Li Daochong had flipped through almost every book related to spirit-based programming in the library. Li Daochong only needed to read it once, and all the content would be recorded by the blood spirit level-up device. Just like a cultivation technique, he would instantly master it and have an eidetic memory. There was a question on the paper that Blizzard Bing had deliberately asked when he saw Li Daochong sleeping in class to make things difficult for him. What was spirit-based programming? This was a basic question. It seemed simple, but it wasn't easy to answer completely. It was easy to lose points. If there was even the slightest deviation, the invigilator could deduct points, and you wouldn't be able to argue. Moreover, different books had similar but different definitions of spirit-based programming. This question was a trap question. Whether or not points would be deducted was completely in the hands of the invigilator. It was a bit like the college entrance exam. Li Daochong thought about it and decided to use his own language to answer. Spirit-based programming is a kind of controllable system that uses spiritual thoughts to control the flow of the spirit base. It outlines the basic spiritual thoughts language that the spirit brain can understand and communicates with the spirit brain, allowing the spirit brain to complete the designated task step by step according to the person's instructions. The time to answer the paper was only 15 minutes. However, to Li Daochong, the time was more than enough. He started writing without any pause. The other examinees were waiting to see this arrogant young man make a fool of himself. From time to time, they would look at Li Daochong. Wang Jing also stared at Li Daochong. In her opinion, this paper was no different from a heavenly book in the eyes of this kid. Not to mention answering the question, it was already good enough that he could understand the question. However, after answering the question, the people who looked at Li Daochong had a strange look in their eyes. The expected expression of stopping and thinking, scratching his head and scratching his head, did not appear on the young man's face. On the contrary, the spirit pen in his hand trembled as he wrote quickly. It was as if he was not answering the question, but copying from a book. Wang Su smiled disdainfully. He himself had to think for a few seconds before answering the paper, but this kid did not even need to think, and his pen was flying. It was obvious that he did not use his brain to answer the questions randomly. The things he wrote were definitely nonsense. At first, Wang Jing thought that her eyes were playing tricks on her. As an invigilator, she could move around as she pleased to prevent anyone from cheating. This kid couldn't be cheating, right? Wang Jing walked behind Li Daochong and turned on the spirit vision screen. She looked at Li Daochong from all angles. She did not find any evidence of cheating. This kid's eyes never left the paper after answering the question. The only person in the examination room who did not care about the examinees was Su Xianro. After instructing Wang Jing, she sat at the front desk and prepared for the next test. She also confirmed the examinees' identities today. In Su Xianro's opinion, if the examinees could not even answer this paper, then there was no need for them to stay in the spirit sequencer industry. 10 minutes later, just as Su Xianro was about to finish her preparations, a paper was handed to her. She raised her head and saw the examinee looking at her indifferently. "I've answered it. Please mark it." Wang Su and the others who were still answering looked at each other. This kid was crazy to want to be in the limelight. How could this paper be finished so quickly? Even if it was finished, wouldn't they check it? Can you guarantee that you were not careless or careless? Li Daochong threw down the paper and returned his seat. Su Xianro frowned. She was very disgusted with this kind of careless person. You still want to take the exam? Just based on your attitude, you've already been eliminated. Who knows how you'll answer the paper? Su Xianro did not want to mark it, but as an invigilator, she had a responsible attitude. She patiently began to mark the paper. After reading the first question, Su Xianro's eyes revealed a bit of surprise. She continued to read and saw what was spirit-based programming. Su Xianro's eyes flashed. What a meticulous answer. She had no way of deducting points. 5 minutes later, Wang Su and the others handed in their papers. Su Xianro quickly marked each person's paper. The answers were all ready-made, so marking was very fast. Brother Wang, seeing how calm you were when answering the paper, these questions must be very easy for you. You should be able to get at least 90 points. Lu Dong said with a face full of envy. Hee hee. Most likely, Wang Su said with a smile. That kid, I wonder how many points he'll get. I'm really looking forward to it. Lu Dong glanced at Li Daochong. What's there to look forward to? With him, I'm afraid he won't even be able to understand the questions. He can only rely on guesses. If he can get 30 points and above, I'll recognize him as my father. Another examinee said. As soon as the examinee finished speaking, Su Xinro raised her head and looked at Li Daochong. You're Li Daochong? Li Daochong nodded. You got a full score of 100 points. You passed the first exam. The exam room suddenly became silent. Wang Jing looked at Li Daochong with a dumbfounded expression. Chapter 294. Full marks, Lu Dong murmured, his mouth twitching. Could there have been a mistake with the test paper? The examinee who wanted to acknowledge his father asked. Wang Jing's expression was blank. She never would have dreamed that this guy could get 100 marks. This test paper was one of the more difficult tests for the third-class spirit sequencer exam. Wang Jing had taken it before, but she had only gotten around 60 marks the first time. As the examiner, Su Xinro's shock was no less than the others. She looked at Li Daochong with a strange expression. Su Xinro couldn't remember anything about this young man. Li Daochong? This name was both unfamiliar and familiar. Su Xinro seemed to have seen this name somewhere before, but she hadn't paid much attention to it. That's right. Su Xinro remembered that half a month ago, her grandfather Su Changxing had given her a list of names that had passed the final test of the 4 ring star zone's North Ring Star Zone. Su Xinro vaguely remembered seeing the name Li Daochong on the list. She hadn't looked at it carefully and had only glanced over it. However, this name was rather conspicuous, so Su Xinro had an impression of it. There were hundreds of billions of people in the Federation, and there were many people with the same name. However, Su Xinro now had a feeling that this young man, called Li Daochong, might be the one on the list. Su Xinro reported everyone's scores one by one. Wang Su had gotten 87 marks, which was quite a high score. As long as one could get more than 80 marks on this test paper, they would pass the test. Su Xinro had asked Li Daochong to get full marks because she was unhappy and wanted to make things difficult for him. She hadn't expected this guy to really get full marks. Other than Wang Su, no one else had gotten more than 80 marks. Lu Dong had barely passed, and half of the others had failed. After all the scores were reported, Li Daochong's full marks were even more stunning. Lu Dong regretted his attitude toward this young man in the waiting room. Now he felt that this kid wasn't just showing off, but actually had some skill. One test paper eliminated 5 people, leaving only Wang Su and Li Daochong qualified to take the next test. Wang Su was taken away by Wang Jing. What he needed to do was a routine test. Li Daochong would be personally tested by Su Xinro. After marking the papers, Su Xinro looked at Li Daochong in a new light. She was looking forward to his performance. The others left examination room number 3 dejectedly. They had failed the simplest written test, so there was no need to continue with the following tests. Only Su Xinro and Li Daochong were left in the examination room. Li Daochong sat in the audience while Su Xinro sat on the stage. The latter was focused on a laptop in front of her. Her slender fingers tapped on the keyboard without saying a word. After waiting for more than 10 minutes, Li Daochong saw that Su Xinro still had no reaction. He felt strange and asked, "Excuse me, when will the second assessment begin?" Su Xinro didn't immediately reply. She stared at the spirit vision screen with a serious expression. After a while, her expression relaxed, and she let out a sigh of relief. "I'm sorry for making you wait. The second test will now begin. Come and take a look at this spirit path pattern and see if there is anything that needs to be improved." Su Xinro stood up and walked in front of Li Daochong. She handed the spiritual brain to him. Li Daochong took the spiritual brain and looked at it. The corner of his mouth slightly raised. Wasn't this the pattern of a 3rd-rank fire talisman? For Li Daochong, who could make 9th-rank talismans, it was easy for him to see the flaws. Li Daochong didn't say a word. He moved his spirit force, and a trace of spiritual energy gathered at his fingertips. He quickly tapped on the keyboard a few times. Okay. It took less than half a minute. Su Xin-ro returned to the stage and sat down. She estimated that Li Daocheng would take at least half an hour to answer the questions. She didn't expect it to be so fast. Su Xin-ro looked at Li Daocheng in disbelief. Her eyes were filled with suspicion. Her pair of plump buttocks touched the chair, and she immediately stood up and walked back. She picked up the spiritual brain and looked at it. In just a few seconds, Su Xin-ro's eyes were filled with shock. She had purposely tampered with this spiritual path pattern. However, the mistakes were hidden very well. Even a third-rank spirit sequence master wouldn't be able to see it. Even if the mistakes were found, it wouldn't be easy to fix it. Without a solid foundation in spiritual base, programming, and spiritual sense control, it would be impossible to fix it. Su Xin-ro's last-minute question was also to make things difficult for Li Daocheng. What really shocked Su Xin-ro wasn't that Li Daocheng had quickly found the mistakes and fixed them. He had actually changed the original parts that were correct. This was another level of performance. The inherent spiritual path pattern was the best pattern that generations of spirit sequence masters had tested and improved over and over again. It could be said that the classical pattern was the truth, and there was no mistake. Only a star-ranked spirit sequence master would study the problems with the classical pattern. Even Su Xin-ro's grandfather, Su Chongxing, who was a veteran special grade spirit sequence master, couldn't find the flaws in the classical pattern. Li Daocheng, on the other hand, easily modified the classic lines. Su Xin-ro looked at the modified spiritual path pattern on the screen, and her breathing became rapid. It was as if she was admiring an oil painting by a master. Su Xin-ro's eyes lit up. After looking at it, she impatiently took the spiritual brain and connected it to a recording device on the podium. She put down a talisman paper and quickly operated the spiritual brain to create the talisman. The invention of the spiritual brain greatly reduced the time needed to create a talisman. Otherwise, even a very powerful talisman master would need a day to create a third-rank talisman using a talisman pen. Now, it only needed a few dozen seconds. Soon, the third-rank talisman modified by Li Daocheng was created. The spiritual path pattern on it lit up. The surrounding spiritual energy quickly gathered into the talisman. Su Xin-ro looked at the third-rank talisman in her hand like it was a work of art. This third-rank fire talisman's power was close to a fourth-rank fire talisman. Su Xin-ro had already forgotten her identity as an invigilator. As for the exam, she threw it to the back of her mind. She quickly looked at the spiritual path pattern she had studied earlier. This was a protective talisman she had created. A talisman. If it could be formed, it could greatly increase the defense against dark ghost attacks. If the frontline soldiers could have a few, it could greatly reduce the death rate. Mr. Li, can you help me see what's wrong with this talisman? I've already studied it for more than a month, but I still can't figure it out. The pattern is drawn, but it has no power when created. It can't even reach a third of what I imagined. Su Xin-ro's words were very smooth and seamless. Li Daocheng looked at it and saw the reason. This was a fifth-rank protective talisman that could activate 3 layers of protection. The outermost layer was an earth shield that protected against physical attacks. The middle layer was a spiritual energy shield that could block dark ghost attacks. The innermost layer activated the metal element and formed a metal armor on the person protecting it. The protective effect could last for more than 10 minutes. The entire spiritual path pattern was very ingenious. It could be used to allow the spirit brain to understand the programmer's intentions and display the basic pattern. Just this alone was not an easy feat. There's no problem with the spirit path's runes. The reason why it's wrong should be because the strength of the spiritual sense isn't right. In other words, there was a mistake during the programming of the spirit base, causing the runes to be uneven. Li Daocheng began to type on the spirit brain's keyboard. The spiritual energy at his fingertips was controlled by his mental force to maintain an extremely precise stability as it was quickly transmitted into the spirit brain. The pattern was still the same. Just from the appearance, there was no change. Su Xin Ro's beautiful eyes stared unblinkingly at Li Daocheng's actions, afraid of missing a single detail. Okay, let's try it now. Li Daocheng quickly finished. Su Xin Ro immediately began. Soon, the protective talisman created by Su Xin Ro was completed. The talisman flickered with a faint light. It was completely different from before. Su Xin Ro immediately placed the protective talisman into the spiritual network to simulate its power. After testing it, the defensive effect was even better than before. There was actually a fourth layer of protection, lightning net. The protective talisman's level was forcefully raised to 6th rank. When Su Xin Ro logged out of the spiritual network, she looked at Li Daocheng with shock, but more admiration and worship. Correct, worship. Su Xin Ro knew that this young man's attainments in making talismans were far above her own. He was even above her grandfather, Su Chongxing. Chapter 295. Li Daocheng's expression was serious when he asked the question. His eyes were clear, and there was not a trace of pretentiousness. He even looked a bit nervous. Li Daocheng's talent in talisman crafting was unquestionable. He had the hot-blooded leveling device, sharp spiritual sense control, and a solid foundation as a programmer from his previous life. This was something that no one else could compare to. But even so, Li Daocheng was still a bit nervous when faced with tests. There was nothing he could do about it. There were too many tests in his previous life. After graduating from kindergarten, he had to face all kinds of tests. At this moment, Li Daocheng's emotions were natural. But in Su Xin Ro's eyes, it was a completely different feeling. After the written test and 2 modifications of the Spirit Path's runes, Su Xin Ro, who had walked step by step, knew better than anyone how talented this young man was in talisman crafting. Su Xin Ro believed that this young man called Li Daocheng could definitely pass the 1st-rank Spirit Sequencer exam, let alone 3rd-rank Spirit Sequencer. Su Xin Ro couldn't help but feel that he was very cute when she saw him being so nervous despite being so strong. After Li Daocheng asked the question, he looked seriously at Su Xin Ro. The latter also looked at him with a smile that was not a smile. The two youths looked at each other for a few seconds. Uffed. Su Xin Ro did not know why, but she could not help but laugh. Li Daocheng was confused. What are you laughing at? Su Xin Ro knew that she had lost her composure, but she could not control her laughter. She covered her mouth and laughed for a while, then said apologetically, "Nothing. I just wanted to laugh." Sorry, you have passed the 3rd exam." Li Daocheng nodded in surprise and said, "Then the 4th exam." Without waiting for Li Daocheng to finish, Su Xin Ro said, "There is no 4th exam. In a bit, come with me to get your certificate. From now on, you are a 3rd-rank Spirit Sequencer." Su Xin Ro knew that Li Daocheng's strength was above a 3rd-rank Spirit Sequencer. Unfortunately, as a 2nd-rank Spirit Sequencer, she could only be certified as a 3rd-rank Spirit Sequencer. Su Xin Ro did not have the authority to certify higher ranks. Li Daocheng was reading the briefing in the waiting room. There was an introduction to the procedure of the Level 3 assessment. It said that there were 4 assessments. He didn't expect that this beautiful examiner would actually make things easier for him. However, since he didn't need to take the test, Li Daocheng naturally wouldn't stand on ceremony. It was best if he could save time. Wang Jing brought Wang Su to another test room and returned. She did not believe that this guy called Li Daocheng could pass the test. Although it wasn't easy to get full marks in the written exam, it did happen occasionally during the examination. Many bookworm examinees thought that the written exam was their world, and they could do whatever they wanted. When it came to creating talismans or modifying talisman patterns, these bookworms would be separated. It was useless for a spirit sequence master to be knowledgeable. Being able to create spirit talismans was what mattered the most. Wang Jing wasn't the only one. Lu Dong and the other examinees didn't believe it either. In all these years, no one on the Scarlet Sun planet had taken the exam before. This guy who came out of nowhere could pass the exam. They didn't believe it. Therefore, they were all waiting at the door, ready to watch a good show. If you didn't have a name, no one would believe that you could pass. While they looked down on you, they were also looking forward to seeing you make a fool of yourself. At this moment, Lu Dong and the rest had such thoughts. Wang Jing had just returned and waited for a while when the door to test room number 3 opened. Li Daocheng was the first to walk out. When Wang Jing, Lu Dong, and the rest saw that he came out so quickly, they concluded that he must have failed the test. Their faces instantly revealed looks of disdain, as though they were saying, "Kid, who asked you to pretend? Why, you didn't pass. You thought too much about taking the exam." The moment Li Daocheng came out, he saw that everyone was looking at him with mocking expressions. He felt that it was funny, but he didn't say anything and walked straight to the spirit floating staircase. Lu Dong couldn't help but say sarcastically, "You want to take the exam when you haven't even grown all your hair? Go home and grow all your hair before you come back." Another examinee added, "TSK, TSK, this is a big loss. 5 million is gone. I won't be able to enter the Association of Spirit Sequencers for the next 10 years. The examinee who wanted to acknowledge Li Daocheng as his father during the written test was even better. He patted Li Daocheng's shoulder and said, "Kid, don't be too arrogant in the future. It's better to be more down to earth." Li Daocheng turned his face and calmly looked at the guy who had patted his shoulder. His eyes were unperturbed as he said calmly, "Don't let your hand go anywhere. It's very dangerous." The examinee was stunned, not knowing what he meant. Li Daocheng sincerely reminded him that this was the Association of Spirit Sequencers. No one would fight here. If they were outside, and everyone wasn't familiar with each other, you would easily be beaten up if you patted someone's shoulder like that. If they were at the border battlefield, everyone would be nervous. If you patted someone like that, they would turn around and chop your hand off. No matter what it meant, it didn't feel good. The examinee was instantly enraged and said angrily, "Kid, how can you say that? You came to the Association of Spirit Sequencers. Don't you know the rules? I'm an apprentice spirit sequencer. When you see me, you have to call me senior. Don't you know such basic manners? You didn't pass the exam and you want to vent your anger on me?" Su Xian Ro, who came out later, saw this scene and frowned. She said coldly, "Take your hand away. How can you speak to Mr. Li like that? Mr. Li has already passed the 3rd grade spirit sequencer exam. You should call him senior." "What?" Several people in the corridor suddenly opened their mouths wide and exclaimed in unison. They were dumbfounded. Pass the exam? 3rd grade spirit sequencer? Su Xian Ro respectfully walked in front of Li Daocheng. The coldness on her face disappeared instantly. She said in a pleasant voice, "Mr. Li, please follow me. You can get your certificate on the 6th floor." Li Daocheng nodded. The examinee who placed his hand on Li Daocheng's shoulder couldn't help but tremble. Even after Li Daocheng left, his hand was still in the air, patting his shoulder. Wang Jing covered her mouth and looked at Li Daocheng's back. Her heart was in turmoil. She had seen many arrogant youngsters in the Association of Spirit Sequencers. When a true genius appeared, she was extremely uncomfortable. Thinking back to her previous attitude, she suddenly realized that she was no different from those snobbish people. Su Changxing looked at the protection talisman that his granddaughter gave him. His old eyes shone with excitement. Qian Changhai, who was standing at the side, was also shocked. The runes on the protection talisman were natural and precisely followed the spirit energy laws. Once activated, Qian Changhai had no doubt that the protection talisman would have a strong protective effect. "Brother Su, I didn't expect your granddaughter's talisman crafting skills to have reached such a level. You have a successor. The student has surpassed the master. You didn't have this ability when you were Xian Ro's age." Qian Changhai sighed. "Brother Qian, if you want to praise, don't do it in front of me. Young people are easily arrogant. Don't be envious of me. Didn't you also take in a good student? Bing had told me that it was thanks to you and that kid that his Beiyang University could be preserved. I heard from Bing He that the kid is extremely talented. Not only did he get first place in the entrance exam, but he also caught the eye of Qin Zhan and wanted to recruit him. That kid actually didn't agree. I think it's most likely you who led him astray. Didn't you also reject the recruitment of the Shenghua Federation's central government? Su Changxing seemed to be comforting him. But when he spoke, he couldn't hide the joy in his eyes. He was quite satisfied with his granddaughter's work. It's all in the past. Why are you still talking about him? That kid doesn't look like me at all. It would be great if we were really alike. Qian Changhai shook his head. Brother Qian, didn't you come looking for me today because of him? It's a pity that this old man really can't help you. If you want to become a spirit sequencer, there's only one path to take. If you pass, it'll be easy. If you don't pass, there's nothing I can do. If you wanted to go easy on him, Su Changxing, can't do it. Brother Su, how could I, Qin Changhai, ask you to go easy on him? You misunderstood my meaning. I want you to take him as your disciple and use him as a springboard to become an apprentice spirit sequencer. Qian Changhai explained. Today, Qian Changhai specially came to look for Su Changxing to pave the way for Li Daochong. For the past 2 days, Li Daochong had asked him many questions about spirit sequencers. Qian Changhai naturally told him everything he knew and told Li Daochong everything he knew. Seeing that Li Daochong seemed to be very enthusiastic about this matter, Qian Changhai took note of it and personally visited Su Changxing to discuss this matter. Qian Changhai didn't want to open the back door. He wanted Su Changxing to take Li Daochong as his disciple. As the saying goes, a great teacher produces a great disciple. In the spirit sequencer circle, Su Changxing stood at the top of the pyramid on planet Scarlet Sunday. He was rather famous even in the four-ring starfield. If Li Daochong became his disciple, passing the apprentice spirit sequencer exam would be a piece of cake with just a little guidance. I don't have any plans to take in a disciple. Let's talk about this later. Su Changxing tactfully rejected and turned to Su Shinro. Your talisman crafting skills have improved greatly. I think you can prepare for the first-grade spirit sequencer exam. Su Changxing couldn't hide his excitement. The hand holding the protective talisman trembled slightly. How could he not be excited when he saw his granddaughter crafting such a powerful talisman? Grandfather, I didn't make this, Su Shinro said honestly. You didn't make it? How can that be? Don't make fun of grandfather. Haven't you been studying this protective talisman recently? The runes on it are exactly the same as the one you showed me before. Su Changxing had a face of disbelief. Qian Changhai also had a strange expression. It wasn't made by Su Shinro. From what he knew, among the younger generation of spirit sequencers on planet Scarlet Sun, Su Shinro was definitely the pride of the heavens. No one could compare to her. Grandfather, let's not talk about this first. The person who helped me modify this talisman is just outside. He has already passed the third-grade spirit sequencer exam. I brought him here to receive his third-grade spirit sequencer certification. Su Shinro cut to the chase. Is that so? Could it be that rising star from the Wong family? That can't be right. Although that kid is a little smart, he is still far from being a first-grade spirit sequencer. He shouldn't have the ability to help you modify this talisman. Su Changxing was puzzled. Grandfather, what are you thinking? That kid from the Wong family hasn't even mastered third-grade talismans yet. How could it be him? It's a young stranger. Su Shinro rolled her eyes. Chapter 296. Su Changxing was curious, but Qian Changhai was even more curious. He had been on planet Scarlet Sun for a period of time and had some understanding of the young people who were ranked at the top of each profession. However, he had no impression of this young man that Su Shinro had mentioned. Although spirit sequencer was a popular profession, it was the hardest to become one of the best among the three major professions. The two elders stared at the door without blinking. Su Shinro went out and returned quickly. She brought in a tall and thin young man with a clean face. The moment Li Daochong stepped into the room, Qian Changhai was stunned. Su Changxing's face was full of surprise. This young man looked very unfamiliar. He had never seen him before. Su Shinro excitedly introduced, Grandpa, this is the person who helped me modify the protection talisman. His name is Li Daochong. Li Daochong? Su Changxing's face was full of doubt. He turned to Qian Changhai and asked, "Brother Qian, isn't your disciple also called?" As Su Chongxing was speaking, Qian Changhai left his seat and walked in front of Li Daochong. He sized up Li Daochong. "Brat, when did you learn how to create talismans?" Facing Qian Changhai's surprise question, Li Daochong scratched his head. He did not expect to meet old man Qian here. Li Daochong grinned and changed the topic. "Grandpa Qian, why are you here?" Qian Changhai's face was stiff. "Brat, don't worry about why I'm here. You hid very well. This old man knew nothing about you being able to create talismans. If I didn't meet you here today, when did you plan to tell me this secret?" When Su Chongxing heard Qian Changhai's words, how could he not understand that this young man in front of him was the disciple that Qian Changhai was proud of? However, Qian Changhai didn't seem to know that his disciple could make talismans. Su Chongxing also felt a little strange. Seeing that Qian Changhai was a little angry, Li Daochong leaned close to his ear and whispered, "Grandpa Qian, I heard that there's a newcomer in the flower pavilion of the Shadow Serene Lane in the underground city. I have a photo. Do you want to take a look?" Qian Changhai's serious expression disappeared in an instant after Li Daochong's words. His turbid old eyes lit up, and his pupils turned into the shape of a heart. He rubbed his hands together in a wretched manner. "Hurry up and take it out for this old man to admire." Li Daochong didn't have any photos. He just wanted to divert Qian Changhai's attention. This old man was more important than looking at beautiful women. However, Li Daochong had already sent a message to Zheng Jiao. As the manager of the Shadow Serene Lane, it was easy for him to get a few photos of beautiful women. The Flower Pavilion was actually the public relations department of the Shadow Serene Lane for receiving VIPs. The staff were all beautiful women. The Flower Pavilion was a little similar to the high-class brothels in the cultivation era in the antiquity times. The women in the Flower Pavilion sold their bodies, but not their smiles. Of course, it was common for them to be taken advantage of by big clients. Everyone tacitly agreed that these beautiful women were willing to suffer a little loss, as long as the price was high enough. Qian Changhai was a frequent customer there. He had been like this when he was in the Blue Bay Star. Li Daochong knew this teacher very well. Zheng Jiao reacted quickly. After reading Li Daochong's message, she immediately sent dozens of photos of beautiful women. Zheng Jiao, who was in the Shadow Serene Lane, felt a little strange. Why did Li Daochong, who had never been interested in women, suddenly ask for sexy photos? After sending the photos, Zheng Jiao pursed her lips. Could it be that Mr. Li was starting to be interested in women? If so, should she change her dressing when she saw Mr. Li in the future? For example, if she wore more revealing clothes, would that win Mr. Li's favor? Li Daochong naturally didn't know what Zheng Jiao was thinking at the moment. He immediately sent the photos to Qian Changhai. The wristwatch on the old man's wrist vibrated, and he impatiently probed it with his telekinesis. The first photo was of a bare back. Qian Changhai almost had a nosebleed. He quickly withdrew his telekinesis and glanced at Li Daochong with satisfaction. Qian Changhai chuckled and said in a low voice, "Boy, you are smart. I won't pursue the matter of you hiding it from me this time. If there is a next time," he stopped in the middle of his words. Li Daochong looked at Qian Changhai helplessly. What will happen? Qian Changhai's eyes flashed. His face became gloomy and ferocious. If there is a next time, the number of photos will be doubled. Otherwise, I won't spare you. Big beads of sweat rolled down the back of Li Daochong's head. He smiled bitterly. Old brother Qian, what are you and your master whispering about? Why don't you tell this old man? Su Chongxing said with some dissatisfaction when he saw the old man and the young man whispering to each other and leaving him aside. Brother Su, I have something to do. I will leave first. Bye. Qian Changhai had a lot of sexy photos and was eager to enjoy them. He didn't care about Su Chongxing's feelings. After saying that, he turned around and left quickly. Su Chongxing's forehead was blue and blue veins stood out. This old man's temperament was still the same as before. Su Shinro saw that the atmosphere was a little awkward and hurriedly said, Grandpa, please verify Li Daochong's identity. Su Chongxing then retracted his gaze from the door and turned to look at Li Daochong. He was somewhat unhappy in his heart. Ro, don't worry. Now the association has a new rule. Before the qualification is verified, there is an additional test. I will invigilate it personally. New rule. Why do I know about it? Su Shinro was confused and stared at Su Changxing, who looked unkind. Of course you don't know. Only the presidents of the associations know it. You're not the president. How can you know it? Su Changxing said casually. In fact, there was no new rule. Su Changxing was just unhappy because of Qin Changhai's reckless behavior and deliberately made things difficult for Li Daocheng. Su Changxing naturally knew his granddaughter's level. Since Su Changxing could pass his certification, it couldn't be fake. But now Su Changxing just didn't want to certify Li Daocheng. If Li Daocheng couldn't finish the test he set, he wouldn't certify him. Su Changxing wanted to let Qin Changhai beg him again. At that time, Su Changxing would scold him and then certify him. When they joined the cultivation army together, Su Changxing suffered a lot because of Qin Changhai. Su Shinro couldn't do anything about it. She looked at Li Daocheng apologetically. Li Daocheng smiled bitterly in his heart. He faintly guessed Su Changxing's intention. Now he finally understood why Chu Qianyue, as a student of Qin Changhai, had such a bad attitude to this old man. Did you modify this? Su Changxing picked up the amulet and asked Li Daocheng. Yes, Li Daocheng replied. The modification is good, but my granddaughter did a lot of work in the early stage. The whole amulet is almost complete. You just did something ready-made. Anyone can find fault. Sometimes it's even due to luck. Therefore, there will be a certain deviation in this kind of test. The test I gave you is very simple. You just have to make a level 5 amulet on the spot. You only have one chance, Su Changxing said indifferently. Su Shinro's expression changed. Level 5 amulet? Succeed in one try? Wasn't this deliberately making things difficult? Many veteran third-class spiritual sequencers didn't have a 100% chance. Su Shinro herself had a 10% chance of making a level 5 amulet. Just as she was about to raise an objection, Li Daocheng said, "Can the equipment here be used?" "Of course, you can use it as you wish." Su Changxing nodded, but there was a bit of pride in his eyes. It was as if he was saying, "Young man, the foundation of making amulets is the person, not the equipment. Don't think that my advanced equipment can increase your success rate. You can use it as you wish." Li Daocheng nodded and walked to the spiritual computer. He immediately started the first step of the procedure. Chapter 297. Li Daocheng couldn't be more familiar with talisman crafting procedures. Spiritual base programming was a piece of cake for him. Level 5 talisman rune patterns were a piece of cake for him now. Tap, tap, tap. Only the sound of Li Daocheng tapping on the keyboard could be heard in the room. The rhythm was bright, and the frequency was highly coordinated. A pair of slender hands danced on the keyboard. Faint spirit energy continuously entered the spiritual brain from his fingertips. At first, Su Changxing looked at Li Daocheng with the attitude of watching a good show, waiting for him to make a fool of himself. But as he watched, Su Changxing's gaze gradually became astonished. This, as the saying goes, the layman watches the show, while the expert watches the skill. As a special grade spirit sequencer, how could Su Changxing not see that Li Daocheng was pretending at this moment? In just a few minutes, a rune pattern of a level 5 talisman had been completed on the spiritual brain. Su Changxing's astonished expression turned into shock. Even he couldn't reach this speed. No matter what, it would take more than 10 minutes. Su Changxing was shocked, and Su Shinro was even more incredulous. A pair of beautiful eyes stared at Li Daocheng's hands that were tapping on the spiritual brain keyboard. Su Shinro's mouth was slightly open, but she didn't realize it. An ignorant love tooth was quietly sprouting in her heart. Su Shinro had seen countless young talents in her life, but she had never seen anyone who could surpass her in terms of spirit sequencing. Li Daocheng was the first. Li Daocheng turned a blind eye to the gazes of the grandmother and granddaughter. He wasn't pretending to be cool, but he was completely immersed in making talismans. Li Daocheng didn't know what was happening around him at all. His mind was completely focused on making talismans. Through the spiritual base programming, He communicated with the spiritual brain so that the spiritual brain could understand the intentions of the cultivator. Then, he would weave a spirit sequence and transform it into patterns or words that humans could understand. These patterns and words contain the principles of spirit energy. The slightest deviation would cause all the previous efforts to be wasted. Li Daocheng took out a piece of talisman paper that he had brought with him, placed it in the recording device, and pressed the confirm button on the keyboard. Conch, champagne, grub times charcoal, muscle spiritual ink was another key material for making talismans. It was made from materials that Li Daocheng often needed to buy. Different levels of talismans required different types of spirit ink. If the requirements were not met, the talisman would fail. The higher the grade of the talisman, the higher the grade of the materials needed and the rarer they were. Purchasing high-grade rare materials was Li Daocheng's true motive for becoming a spirit sequencer. Otherwise, he wouldn't have come to the Spirit Sequencer Association. The printing process of the spiritual ink was very fast. In less than 10 seconds, a level 5 spiritual talisman slowly flowed out from the other side. The talisman emitted a faint halo, and the surrounding spiritual energy was naturally attracted to it. Li Daocheng picked up the talisman and said, "Senior, this is a 5th grade fire talisman. Please take a look." Su Chongqing recovered from the shock when he heard the voice. He took the talisman and examined it for a moment. Then his eyes widened and his hands trembled. This kid casually made a 5th grade talisman that was infinitely close to a 6th grade talisman. It was an enhanced 5th grade talisman, and its power was much greater than a normal 5th grade talisman. The runes on it were not the classic runes that were commonly used, but self-created runes. Su Chongqing had already forgotten the unhappiness in his heart. Nothing could make him more excited than discovering a genius in the Spirit Sequencer Association. It was an indisputable fact that Li Daocheng's standard was far above his granddaughter's. Su Chongqing's gaze towards Li Daocheng changed. There was a bit more respect in it. This was a genius in the Spirit Sequencer Association who would definitely surpass him in the future. "Grandpa, can we verify Li Daocheng's identity now?" Su Xinro didn't forget to remind Su Chongqing. "Of course, but I still have a question that I hope Little Li can answer truthfully." Su Chongqing couldn't hide his excitement. "Senior, please ask," Li Daocheng said politely. "What's the upper limit of your talisman creation?" Su Chongqing asked. Li Daocheng was able to create an enhanced 5th grade talisman in one go. How could a standard be limited to 5th grade? If the materials are complete, I should be able to create a 10th grade talisman. Li Daocheng paused for a moment before replying truthfully. "Yes." Su Xinro and Su Chongqing both sucked in a breath of cold air. Being able to create a 10th grade talisman was the standard of a 1st grade spirit sequencer. A 3rd grade spirit sequencer's upper limit was 6th grade, a 2nd grade spirit sequencer's upper limit was 9th grade, and a 1st grade spirit sequencer's upper limit was 12th grade. Being able to create a 10th grade talisman was the entry level of a 1st grade spirit sequencer. How old was he? Su Xinro couldn't hide the shock on her face. He was at least 2 or 3 years younger than her. Good. Our Shenghua Federation has another pillar of talent. Little Li, I'll make an exception today and use my authority to directly certify you as a 2nd grade spirit sequencer. Su Chongqing suddenly laughed out loud. Li Daocheng's expression didn't change much. He didn't care about the certification level. He only needed to have an official identity so that it would be easier for him to find out how to obtain high-grade materials. That was all. Su Xinro looked at Su Chongqing, puzzled. Her grandfather had always been cautious. Even if Li Daocheng showed amazing talent, he wouldn't use his precious authority. This was the only time he had the authority to recommend someone. Su Chongqing immediately opened the spiritual computer in front of him. After a quick operation, a jade card popped out from the side. Little Li, this is your 2nd grade spirit sequencer's certification card. From now on, you're a 2nd grade spirit sequencer of our Shenghua Federation. Furthermore, I've also made you a member of the Spirit Sequencer Association. Normally, one can't become a member of the association without outstanding contributions. However, with your talent, it's only a matter of time before you make contributions in the future. I have high hopes for you. Su Changxing patted Li Daocheng's shoulder. Li Daocheng took the jade card and put it into his storage bag. He smiled and said, "Thank you, senior. I suddenly feel a lot of pressure." How can a young man like you not feel a little pressure? Now that the Hades is constantly making moves, a big war could break out at any time. The Federation needs young people like you and Shinro. You are everyone's hope. Su Changxing's excited expression turned serious. Li Daocheng nodded and said, "One day, the Hades will be chased out of the human realm by us." Hearing Li Daocheng's words, Su Changxing looked at him with gratification and said, "Little Li, I'm very happy to hear you say that. Yes, one day, the Hades will be chased out of the human realm by us. We'll make those damn dark ghosts go back home and return peace to the human realm." 2 hours later, Li Daocheng returned to the cultivation room in the Shadow Serene Lane. He politely rejected Su Changxing's job offer. Li Daocheng's main purpose of making talismans was to give himself a few more life-saving trump cards when hunting dark ghosts. It was not for work, so he naturally would not stay at the Spirit Sequencer Association to do research. Su Changxing's offer was extremely tempting. If it were anyone else, regardless of whether they had other goals in mind, they would probably agree first. Su Changxing let Su Shinro be Li Daocheng's assistant and assist Li Daocheng in his research. He gave Li Daocheng the position of chairman of the Scarlet Sun Stars Spirit Sequencer Association. This was a very high position that was usually held by first-grade spirit sequencers. "Grandpa, Li Daocheng is so young. Although he's very talented, isn't it a bit too hasty to let him be chairman?" After Li Daocheng left, Su Shinro asked Su Changxing with a puzzled expression, "Rower, don't just look at things on the surface. Grandpa wants to ask you, how old is Li Daocheng this year?" Su Changxing asked with narrowed eyes. "It's on the information. 19 years old." Su Shinro did not understand. 19 years old, able to make a level 10 spirit talisman, get first place in the test, qualify for the final exam of 100 schools, the most valued student of my old friend Qian Shanghai, the son of the #1 person in Blue Bay Star, Li Tianyang. He was nothing before, but in a short year, he changed so much. What do you think is the most reasonable explanation? Su Changxing asked. Rower doesn't know. Su Shinro replied in confusion. She didn't think that much. If it wasn't for an amazing, fortuitous encounter, then he was taken in as a disciple by an almighty who wandered the world. Otherwise, there's no other explanation, Su Changxing said earnestly. Almighty? Grandpa, are you talking about those old monsters in the Federation? Su Shinro asked in surprise. Other than those few, Grandpa really can't think of anyone else in the Federation who has such ability. In the future, you should interact more with Li Daocheng. Maybe it will be very helpful for you in the future. This kid's future is limitless. Old Qian is really lucky. Li Daocheng actually became his disciple. Su Changxing's tone carried a bit of jealousy. Li Daocheng had already started making level 10 spirit talismans. Before he left, he asked Su Changxing for a tale of spirit ink to make level 10 spirit talismans. Li Daocheng originally planned to buy it with money, but Su Changxing refused. He only said that Li Daocheng could work part-time at the Spirit Sequencer Association after the joint exam of 100 schools. If he agreed, he would give the spirit ink to Su Changxing for free. This tale of spirit ink was worth at least tens of thousands of elementary spirit stones, which was hundreds of millions of Federation coins. It was impossible to work for a long time, but Li Daocheng could still accept working part-time for a short period of time. Moreover, after the joint exam of 100 schools, he still had to continue making spirit talismans. There was no place more suitable than the Spirit Sequencer Association for making spirit talismans. Li Daocheng naturally agreed. This tale of spirit ink could make at least 3 level 10 spirit talismans. However, Li Daocheng hadn't tried it yet, so there was a high chance of failure. But he still had to make it for the first time. For the next 3 days, Li Daocheng didn't eat or sleep as he calmly made spirit talismans. In the end, at the cost of 2 failures, he successfully made a level 10 fire talisman. It was also a strengthened version. There were still 4 days left before the joint exam of 100 schools. All candidates had to arrive at Kangwoo Planet 3 days in advance. There was no need to take the space shuttle to Kangwoo Planet. They could directly teleport there through the teleportation formation. Naturally, the cost was high, but the Federation was willing to spend money for those who qualified for the joint exam of 100 schools. Li Daochong rested for a day before packing up and heading to the central building of Crimson Sun City. There is only one small spirit light teleportation formation on Crimson Sun Planet there. When Li Daochong arrived, there were already more than 10 students gathered in the central building. They were all candidates who had qualified for the joint exam of 100 schools. The central building was heavily guarded. Ordinary people couldn't enter. Usually, only cultivators with status could enter once after paying a high price. There were 4 guards outside the entrance. They were all cultivators at the peak stage of the Qi condensation realm. Li Daochong showed them the pass card when he entered. There was also a mid-stage foundation establishment elder at the entrance. The spirit light teleportation formation was on the 9th floor of the central building. There was nothing on this floor except for a 5-meter wide spirit light teleportation formation in the center. Li Daochong walked out of the spirit light, floating stairs, and looked around. Suddenly, a familiar and graceful figure came into view. Li Daochong was surprised. Why was she here? Chapter 298. Li Daochong was very surprised that Wei Xing would appear here. Li Daochong had almost forgotten about this person after their last parting. If they hadn't met today, he wouldn't have thought of Wei Xing. Although the two of them had gone through hardships together on the Ghost Flying Shuttle, Li Daochong didn't have a good impression of Wei Xing. Li Daochong never liked this kind of girl with a strong background, outstanding strength, and outstanding temperament. After feeling a little surprised, Li Daochong walked to the side as if nothing had happened and quietly waited for the spirit light teleportation formation to open. In the entire Scarlet Sun Planet, there were only about 20 students who qualified for the joint examination. It was slightly more than Blue Bay Star, but it was still very limited. At this moment, every single one of the youths who appeared here was a genius of the Scarlet Sun Planet. However, the most dazzling person here was undoubtedly Wei Xing. Her appearance made everyone else pale in comparison. The difference wasn't small at all. Wei Xing wasn't from Scarlet Sun Planet. She was from Kangwoo Planet. She appeared here today because she had been cultivating in seclusion in Scarlet Sun Planet's Scarlet Sun Training Hall. Wei Xing was also participating in the joint examination, but her slot was on Kangwoo Planet and not Scarlet Sun Planet. Not only that, Wei Xing was also one of the top 10 seeded contestants in this joint examination. Peak Foundation establishment at the age of 20 was unimaginable on a 4th-class cultivation planet. The top geniuses on Scarlet Sun Planet were only at the early stage of Foundation establishment, and they had only reached this stage by relying on spirit herbs. Wei Xing stood quietly in front of a spirit light teleportation formation with her eyes closed. Beside her were 2 young people wearing heaven-grade robes. They didn't seem to be from Scarlet Sun Planet either. Their auras were extremely powerful, and they were definitely at the middle stage of Foundation establishment. The 2 young people were eagerly talking to Wei Xing, but the latter didn't seem to hear them and occasionally replied with a short sentence. Wei Xing was completely focused and didn't care about anything around her. She only wanted to hurry to her hometown, Kangwoo Planet. There were still 3 days to rest when she got home, and then the joint examination of 100 schools would be next. From a moment her spirit vein awakened, the joint examination of 100 schools was always on her mind. Wei Xing was determined to enter one of the 4 great academies. Although the Wei clan was powerful and controlled the Shadow Serene Square, most of their businesses were shady. Wei Xing wasn't willing to hide underground. She wanted to wash the Wei family clean. More importantly, she wanted to realize her dream of becoming one of the core members of the Shenghua Federation. The two young masters, Ouyang-ju and Chun Yifeng, were attracted to Wei Ziying at first sight. If it wasn't for the powerful aura emitting from the latter's body, they would have already gone up to strike up a conversation. These two were already the top young talents of Scarlet Sun Planet. There was no need to mention Ouyang-ju, the first successor of the Ouyang family, one of the four great families. Chun Yifeng was the eldest son of the mayor of Scarlet Sun Planet. Both of them had successfully built their foundation. Apart from the two of them, none of the disciples from the other three great clans had built their foundation. The family didn't cultivate to begin with, so no one was participating in the joint examination of 100 schools this time. Recently, the Ouyang clan has been suffering for bad luck. Rumor has it that the old ancestor, Ouyang clan, is in the Ouyang clan. Are you trying to frighten me with your pain? Shanlai, Lok Xinhuan, trekking guide, however, a starving camel is still bigger than a horse. The Ouyang family supported Ouyang-ju's cultivation regardless of the cost, allowing him to build his foundation before the joint examination of 100 schools began. The Ouyang family had already placed all their hopes on Ouyang-ju, allowing him to use the family's resources freely. As long as he could achieve good results in the joint examination of 100 schools, the Ouyang family would be able to maintain their reputation as one of the four great families of Scarlet Sun Planet. When Li Daochong walked out of the floating staircase, Ouyang-ju saw him. "Brother Chun, that kid is here." Ouyang-ju pursed his lips. Chun Yifeng turned around and glanced at Li Daochong. With a cold face, he said, "Humph, Jiran is ignoring me now. It's all thanks to this kid. When we reach Kangwu Planet, the first person I'll teach him a lesson will be him." Ouyang-ju smiled sinisterly. "Why wait until we reach Kangwu Planet? We can teach him a lesson now. Although this kid is powerful, you and I haven't been idle these past few months. We didn't eat the spirit-cultivating pills for nothing." Chun Yifeng frowned. "Here? That's not very convenient. The central building doesn't allow private fights. This place is directly under the jurisdiction of Kangwu Planet. Even though my father is the mayor of Scarlet Sun City, he doesn't have the authority to interfere. The guards at the entrance are all very high-ranking. There are even Jindan cultivators among them. If we fight here, we will be disqualified." Ouyang-ju said in a low voice, "We don't have to do it ourselves. That fairy-like girl isn't from Scarlet Sun Planet. She's most likely just passing by to borrow the teleportation array of Scarlet Sun Planet. From what I can see, that girl is not only powerful, but her background isn't simple either. The two youngsters surrounding her must also have an extraordinary background. Perhaps we can make use of them to teach that kid Li Daochong a lesson." Chun Yifeng narrowed his eyes and said with interest, "How do we make use of them?" Ouyang-ju said with a cunning face, "That's easy, brother Chun." Ouyang-ju's voice became lower and lower. In the end, only his lips moved, but no sound came out. Chun Yifeng's expression was very interesting as he nodded repeatedly. Then, the two of them walked towards Li Daochong. Seeing Ouyang-ju and Chun Yifeng walking over, Li Daochong frowned slightly, and a light flashed in his eyes. The two of them walked up to Li Daochong and greeted him warmly. Ouyang-ju smiled and praised Li Daochong for being so powerful. Li Daochong looked at Ouyang-ju's fake smile and felt that something was wrong. "Brother Li, you were in the limelight during the joint examination. You were number one in the direct examination. There has never been such a godly person on planet Crimson Sun before. Compared to you, Brother Chin and I are ashamed of our inferiority. If there was any misunderstanding between us, I, Ouyang-ju, would like to apologize to you." Ouyang-ju spoke to Li Daochong for the first time. Li Daochong was surprised that he could say such words. Did the sun rise from the west? One shouldn't hit a smiling person. Hearing Ouyang-ju's words, Li Daochong couldn't treat him coldly. He continued, "The past has long been forgotten. Today, we only have one identity, the examinees of the joint examination of 100 schools. Let's work hard together." Chun Yifeng also said, "That's right. Brotherly, I wish you success in this joint examination of 100 schools." Li Daochong cupped his hands and said, "Same to you." Ouyang-ju saw that the greetings were almost over. He rolled his eyes and said, "Brotherly, That girl looks very unfamiliar. She shouldn't be a local, but her appearance is really out of this world. She's as beautiful as a fairy. I think only a talent like Brother Li is worthy of her. Li Daochong glanced at Ouyang Ju and smiled. Brother Ouyang, if you like her, don't use me as a shield. Ouyang Ju continued. How could I? I'm telling the truth. If I had half of Brother Li's elegance, I would have come forward to get to know her. But I don't have half of Brother Li's elegance. Ouyang Ju and Chun Yifeng spared no effort in their pursuit of Li Daochong, attracting a lot of attention. Everyone in the hall noticed that the three of them were gathered together, talking and laughing. Li Daochong naturally didn't believe that the two of them had changed their minds. He had been on guard in his heart, and his words were watertight. After a while, Ouyang Ju and Chun Yifeng left without saying goodbye, leaving Li Daochong behind. Li Daochong looked indifferently at the backs of the two guys who were up to something. A cold light flashed in his eyes, and he smelled the scent of a conspiracy. Ouyang Ju and Chun Yifeng walked up to Wei Xing and the others with sinister smiles on their faces. The two young men around Wei Xing glanced at the two of them with disdain. Coming from a second-class cultivation planet, they naturally looked down on this group of bastards from the Red Sun planet. Leave if you know what's good for you, one of the young men said coldly. He didn't want these two bastards to disturb Wei Xing. This young man was the descendant of the Feng family of the Kangwu planet. His cultivation level was at the middle stage of Foundation establishment, and he was a student of the superclass of Kangwu University. He was also one of Wei Xing's many pursuers, Feng Yuanzheng. The other young man had an even bigger background. He was the son of the Cloud Jade Robe's president of the Kangwu planet, Tu Muxian. His cultivation level was at the late stage of Foundation establishment. Friend, please don't be impatient. We'll leave after saying a few words. Ouyang Ju didn't get angry at all and said with a pleasant face. Ouyang Ju didn't dare to vent his anger. The other party was a middle-stage Foundation establishment cultivator, and his identity wasn't simple either. He obviously wasn't someone he could provoke. Spit it out. Feng Yuanzheng said impatiently. Ouyang Ju and Chun Yifeng looked at each other. They saw a trace of anger in each other's eyes, but more of it was forbearance. These two young masters, when had anyone ever spoken to them like this on the Red Sun planet? However, the other party's forcefulness showed that he had an extraordinary background. Ouyang Ju swallowed his anger and said with a smile, Friend, someone said that you two are like two flies buzzing around this fairy. It's disgusting. Who said that? I think he's tired of living. Feng Yuanzheng grabbed Ouyang Ju's collar and said coldly. Him. Ouyang Ju pointed at Li Daochong. Feng Yuanzheng came all the way to the Red Sun planet for Wei Xing. He had been waiting in front of the Divine Light Array since early this morning. After Wei Xing came, he spared no effort to please her, but the former always ignored him. Feng Yuanzheng's mood had already dropped to the freezing point. Now that he heard someone call him a fly, he was furious. Tu Muxian was the same, but he was obviously smarter than Feng Yuanzheng. Just as the latter pushed Ouyang Ju away and walked towards Li Daochong, Tu Muxian said to Ouyang Ju, Are you sure that kid said that? Ouyang Ju nodded. Absolutely. Tu Muxian smiled. You were talking and laughing with that kid just now, and now you're telling us to make things difficult for him. It's obvious that you two have a grudge. Otherwise, there's no way to explain your actions. You want to use us to teach that kid a lesson. Ouyang Ju's face was serious. Absolutely not. I actually want to be friends with you, hoping to find a backer in the 100 Schools Alliance exam. Tu Muxian chuckled. I can believe your reason. Although I don't like sinister and cunning people like you, I don't like people speaking ill of me behind my back even more. Tu Muxian walked towards Li Daochong, his eyes cold. He dared to call him a fly? Then I'll turn you into a fly. Ouyang Ju and Chun Yifeng looked at each other and smiled, then followed to watch the show. After the four of them left, Wei Xing slowly opened her eyes and looked in the direction where they had left. Immediately, Wei Xing's beautiful eyes widened. Chapter 299. How could Wei Xing forget Li Daocheng? Back then, this guy had swindled her out a huge sum of money, a total of 100 million Federation coins. Wei Xing was the daughter of Kangwu Planet's Wei family. Her status and incomparable talent made it so no one dared to disrespect her. Anyone who dared to disrespect her was courting death. There was always an exception, and Li Daocheng was one of them. Back then, this kid was only in the middle stage of qi condensation, but he dared to take advantage of Wei Xing's injury and sell her a pill for 100 million Federation coins. However, that pill had indeed cured Wei Xing's underworld flame and hidden injuries. Wei Xing was very curious about such a miraculous pill. If she could get her hands on a few more pills, it would be like having another life-saving trump card. Therefore, Wei Xing did not swallow the pure white dew pill that Li Daocheng had given her at that time. Instead, she bit off a bit and wrapped it in spirit energy, then brought it back to Kangwu Planet for analysis. Wei Xing wanted to analyze the composition of the pure white dew pill and try to concoct some. However, the results of the analysis made Wei Xing's jaw drop. What kind of elixir was this? Bullsh * T pure white dew pill was just an ordinary recovery elixir that could be bought anywhere on a market for 1 or 2,000 federal coins. Wei Xing was confused. Since the elixir that Li Daocheng gave him was fake, why did his serious injuries get better after taking the elixir? Wei Xing finally told this to her grandfather, Wei Beitong. After hearing Wei Xing's story, Wei Beitong became very interested in Li Daocheng. Wei Beitong was one of the few medicine refiners in the Shenhua Federation. The reason why the Wei family could become a super family and control an underground force like the Shadow Serene Square was because of Wei Beitong. Even if the core members of the Federation knew about the Wei family's shady business, they would turn a blind eye to it. Wei Beitong's connections were all over the Federation, including the ruler of the Federation. A one-star alchemist was a supreme existence in the medical world. Wei Beitong's special grade and one-star grade spirit herbs were something that all the major powers wanted to get their hands on. Wei Beitong was proficient in cultivation, healing, and recovery. No one was willing to offend a one-star alchemist, not even those Yuanian grand cultivators or even the legendary deity transformation stage human immortals. After taking Wei Xing's pulse, Wei Beitong was even more shocked. He knew his granddaughter's condition better than anyone else. Not only did Wei Xing's body not have a single trace of underworld fire left, even the minor injuries from before had completely healed. In fact, she was even stronger than before she was injured. At that time, Wei Beitong's old eyes shone brightly, as if he had discovered a treasure trove. Wei Xing could not understand Wei Beitong's current state. She had been tricked, so why was her grandfather so happy? Grandpa, why are you so happy that Xing was cheated? Wei Xing asked angrily. Xing, the medicine is fake, but your injuries are completely healed. There's only one explanation. It was not medicine that healed your injuries, but a person. Wei Beitong replied meaningfully. A person? Wei Xing pondered. That's right. It was a person. I just checked your spirit meridians, and they are stronger than before. There's a trace of pure spirit qi in your body. In the ancient cultivation era, before cultivation and medicine refinement technology reached the level of industrialization, treatment was usually done by a person. They used acupuncture, qi manipulation, and other methods that were extremely difficult to master. These methods seemed clumsy and had many limitations, but they were very effective and had no side effects. Wei Beitong explained. Grandpa, you mean that kid used ancient medical skills to treat Xing? Wei Xing opened her eyes slightly and asked. That's right. I guess it was the qi manipulation method. I didn't think that there would be someone who knows the qi manipulation method that has been lost for thousands of years. This kid is not simple. Do you know where he is now? Grandpa wants to meet this little friend. Wei Beitong couldn't wait. He's missing. What? Missing? How many days has it been since you came back from the Blue Base Star? How could he be missing? Grandpa, take a look for yourself. This is the result of my investigation. Wei Xing handed Li Daocheng's investigation report to Wei Beitong. After reading Li Daocheng's investigation report, Wei Beitong let loose a torrent of abuse. Blue Bay stars, a bunch of good-for-nothings. Idiots, trash, idiots. They actually didn't want this kind of talent. Can't they tell the difference between gold and dung? A bunch of dung machines. I'm so angry. Wei Beitong's face was red. After that, Wei Beitong personally went to the Blue Bay Star, but found nothing. This young man, called Li Daocheng, seemed to have disappeared from the face of the earth. It wasn't until more than a month ago that there was news. But at that time, Wei Beitong had been preoccupied with important matters, and Wei Ziying had already been in seclusion for several months. The search for Li Daocheng was thus put on hold. Wei Ziying knew that Li Daocheng was on Red Sun Planet, but how could she think of him at this juncture? The only thing on her mind was the joint examination of 100 schools and nothing else. Wei Ziying hadn't expected Li Daocheng to appear here. It seemed that he must have also gone to Kangwu Planet to prepare for the joint examination of 100 schools. When Feng Yuanzheng heard Ouyang Ju's words, he was burning with rage. He walked up to Li Daocheng and reached out to grab his collar. Li Daocheng didn't move. He floated backwards, and Feng Yuanzheng grabbed nothing but air. Trash from a fourth-class cultivation planet. Someone said that you call me a fly behind my back. Kneel down, apologize, and kowtow 3 times, and I won't pursue the matter. What do you think? Feng Yuanzheng looked a little surprised that he had missed. You'd better go away while I'm still in a good mood. Li Daocheng's gaze was extremely cold, and the aura in his body was surging slightly. Li Daocheng was a little angry. It wasn't because of this guy who had hooted at him, but because the despicable and shameless actions of Ouyang Ju and Chen Yifeng had touched Li Daocheng's bottom line. Trash, what did you say? Say it again. Feng Yuanjing wondered if there was something wrong with his ears. There is actually someone who dared to speak to him like that on a fourth-class cultivation planet. Scram, Li Daocheng said in a deep voice as he suddenly released his aura. Feng Yuanzheng was caught off guard, and his mind buzzed. He almost fell to the ground. Tu Muxian, who had just arrived, stopped in his tracks. Even he might not be able to produce such a powerful sound wave. Ouyang Ju and Chen Yifeng, who were behind Tu Muxian, were in an even better state. They staggered and almost fell. Fortunately, there was a pillar to support them, so they didn't fall. The other students standing around didn't feel anything. That scram was nothing special. Li Daocheng was only targeting these 4 people. The others weren't attacked. Feng Yuanzheng was completely enraged. Although there were guards around the spirit light array, they were all 4th-class administrative level. Feng Yuanzheng didn't put them in his eyes. You dare to plot against me? You're courting death. Feng Yuanzheng said as he punched towards Li Daocheng. The fist of a middle-stage foundation establishment cultivator could split mountains and crush stones. It was no joke. There was a world of difference between a cultivator and a cultivator. This punch was enough to collapse a building. Li Daocheng's lips slightly curved. Just as he was about to make a move, a delicate shout sounded. Stop! This delicate shout also carried a sound wave attack. Not only did it shake their eardrums, it also made their minds chaotic. Wei Ziying didn't restrain herself like Li Daocheng. Her voice covered the whole place. All the students of Red Sun Planet covered their heads and sat on the ground. Ouyang Ju and Chen Yifeng were no exception. Only Li Daocheng stood there as if nothing had happened. Feng Yuanjing's raised fist was suspended in the air. This delicate shout went straight to his heart, causing his body to go numb. Tu Muxian revealed a strange expression. Wei Ziying hadn't left the spirit light array since this morning. Her eyes were closed, waiting to be teleported. At this moment, not only did Wei Ziying open her eyes, she also let out such a fierce shout. Her expression was not good, as if she was very angry with Feng Yuanjing's actions. Tu Muxian smiled. He was smart. He wasn't like that idiot Feng Yuanzheng who was instigated by others and lost his head in anger. Zing, this brat scolded me. Didn't you hear it? Feng Yuanzheng saw Wei Ziying walking over and quickly explained. Wei Ziying didn't even look at Feng Yuanzheng. As for his words, she acted as if she didn't hear it. She walked straight to Li Daocheng. Li Daochong. Wei Xing looked at Li Daochong with curiosity in her eyes. On her way. Li Daochong smiled and nodded. Perhaps I should call you Mr. Li. Wei Xing tapped the tip of her nose with her slender index finger and looked thoughtfully at Li Daochong. As you wish, on her way. Li Daochong shrugged. My grandfather wants to see you. Do you have time? Wei Xing went straight to the point. No. Li Daochong replied straightforwardly. No? How can that be? You must be participating in the joint exam. There's still 3 days until the exam. How can you not have time? Do you know who my grandfather is? Wei Xing frowned. She didn't expect Li Daochong to refuse so straightforwardly. There were tens of millions of people who wanted to see Wei Beitong, if not 100 million. There was even a cultivator from the Yuanying who was willing to spend 1 million elementary spirit stones just to have a meal with Wei Beitong. This brat actually told Wei Beitong that he didn't have time? There must be something wrong with his brain. Old Ghost Zhang told me who your grandfather is. Of course I know who he is. It's not important who he is. I really don't have time. I don't want to be distracted by anything before the joint exam. Li Daochong replied indifferently. All right then. Do you have time after the joint exam? Wei Xing compromised. Feng Yuanzheng and Tu Muxian were dumbfounded when they heard the conversation between Wei Xing and this unfamiliar young man. Feng Yuanzheng's legs trembled slightly and went limp. His mind went blank, and he barely managed to stand up. Wei Beitong knew this brat and wanted to see him. Feng Yuanzheng actually wanted to attack him just now. Feng Yuanzheng's face was ashen. Tu Muxian smiled lightly. Feng Yuanzheng, this love rival, could be eliminated. One less was one less. He could take it slow. We'll see, Li Daochong replied casually. Chapter 300. Li Daochong's rejection of the invitation made Wei Xing unhappy. What kind of person was her grandfather? Not many people in the entire Federation dared to reject her grandfather's invitation. Li Daochong didn't care about what Wei Xing was thinking. After hearing the old man's words, he walked towards the teleportation array. The teleportation array was the fastest and most convenient means of transportation. It was more than 10,000 times faster than the space shuttle. It only took a few seconds to travel from one location to another. The only drawback was that it consumed a lot of energy. A single long-distance teleportation would consume at least 10,000 elementary spirit stones. There were more than 20 people in front of him. Teleporting to the distant Kangwu planet in one go would consume close to 300,000 spirit stones. If they took the space shuttle and carried hundreds of people, it would only cost a few thousand spirit stones to travel from Crimson Sun Planet to Kangwu Planet. However, it would take 3 days. It was Li Daochong's first time entering the teleportation array. He couldn't help but be curious. He wanted to see how it felt to be teleported. After everyone entered the teleportation array, the old man immediately activated the teleportation array. The 20 people were enveloped by a white glow. When the white glow dissipated, they disappeared without a trace. Li Daochong only saw a flash of light in front of him. Then, a spatial door appeared in front of him. He stepped out of it. His vision suddenly opened up. His surroundings were a little blurry at first, but they soon became clear. Green mountains and clear waters. Birds chirped and flowers bloomed. The 20 examinees appeared at the foot of a lush mountain. This was also the location of a teleportation array. However, it wasn't as heavily guarded as the Crimson Sun Planet. The teleportation array was set up in the open. There were only 2 guards sitting at the side. However, both of them had reached the Foundation establishment stage. Wang Xiang and Chun Lin were soldiers of the Kangwu Planet's Border Defense Army. Both of them were second lieutenants. The guards of the teleportation array would be rotated every 3 years. The 2 of them had been guarding it for half a year now. Seeing the 20 examinees appear, the 2 of them didn't pay much attention at first. The teleportation array had been unusually busy these few days. Almost every day, there would be more than 10 batches of examinees arriving at Kangwu Planet from all over the 4th Ring Starfield. However, when the light from the teleportation array disappeared completely, The appearance of the 20 examinees could be seen clearly. Wei Ziying's appearance made Wang Xiang and Chen Lin suck in a breath of cold air. The two of them quickly stood up and bowed respectfully. Mississippi. Wei Ziying nodded and waved her hand. There's no need to be so courteous. I'm just a student of the joint examination. You guys can go about your business. The two of them then returned to their seats. Whoosh! A luxurious flying shuttle descended from the sky. Oh my God! It is the Emperor's shuttle. Someone among the examinees, Ouyang Ju and Chun Yifeng, the two young masters' eyeballs almost fell to the ground. Even though they were from prominent families on planet Scarlet Sun, this was the first time they had seen the Saint Emperor's flying shuttle with their own eyes. Was Emperor's flying? The space was the Emperor's too. Of the world of Emperor's was. To the Emperor's world. Emperor's. To of it, of it. Of the of song. Tease. Was. Of the of. The entire body of the shuttle was made of purple mystic devil silver. It was a large artifact with many functions. It could even be used as a small shuttle. The White Emperor's shuttle landed in front of Wei Ziying. The door opened, and a middle-aged man with a medium build and a serious expression came out. He was a mid-stage Jindan cultivator. Li Daocheng's pupil shrank. Wei Ziying's status seemed to be higher than he had imagined. Meng Yu welcomes Miss out of seclusion. The middle-aged man said respectfully, Thank you. Wei Ziying nodded slightly and turned to Li Daocheng. Mr. Li, where do you want to go? I will send you. Li Daocheng smiled. Thank you for your kindness, Owner Wei. This is my first time in Kanwu Planet, and I would like to look around. I will not trouble you. Up to you. Wei Ziying's tone turned cold after being rejected again. She then boarded the space shuttle without looking back. Meng Yu looked at Li Daocheng strangely and boarded the shuttle as well. With a whoosh, the space shuttle flew into the sky and disappeared in the blink of an eye. Other than the sound of the space shuttle breaking through the air, the space shuttle did not make a single sound. Li Daocheng did not know any of the candidates on Planet Crimson Sunday. Those that he did know had conflicts with each other. Li Daocheng naturally would not move with them. He was afraid that he would not be able to control himself and cripple Ouyang Ju and Chun Yifeng. That would be troublesome. Li Daocheng was not afraid of revenge from their families, but he did not want to cause trouble. Li Daocheng entered the spiritual nexus and found a map of planet Kanwu. He then left silently. After walking for a while, Li Daocheng took out his Tsang ink and flew towards Tsang Cloud City. Before long, Li Daocheng received 3 messages on his wristwatch. One was from Qian Changhai, wishing him good results. The other was from Ding Fugue, that little fatty. It had been more than a month since they last met. Brotherly, Leader Qin asked me to come to Planet Kanwu to receive you until the end of the joint examination. Send me your location when you reach Planet Kanwu. I'll go find you. The third message was from Yinping. Young Master, when are you coming back? There seems to be a problem with Master's closed-door cultivation. He hasn't sent any news for 2 months. Come back quickly. The corners of Li Daocheng's eyes twitched when he saw Yinping's message. His father had said that he would be in closed-door cultivation for 3 months. But for some reason, it had been delayed again and again. Now, almost half a year had passed, but he still had not come out. At first, Li Daocheng had been a little worried, but every time Li Tianyang sent a message, he said that there was no problem. His cultivation was steadily improving, and he was in good condition. With Li Qingyao and Yinping around, Li Daocheng believed that nothing would happen. However, just as the joint examination was about to begin, Silver Bottle sent such a message. This made Li Daocheng feel uneasy. During this time, Li Daocheng had been so busy that he had forgotten to contact Yinping. When he saw the message, he immediately replied, "See you in 7 days." 3 days later, the joint examination of 100 schools would officially begin. Li Daocheng did not need to participate in the initial test of the 10,000 ghost array and the second test. He directly entered the final test. For Li Daocheng, the official test was in 5 days. The final test was divided into 2 parts, a written test and an actual combat test. Although many things had happened recently, Li Daocheng had not left Blue Bay Star for long. It had only been a little more than 2 months. After Li Daocheng replied, Yinping quickly replied with one word. Okay. This girl's simplicity was reflected in her words and actions. After not seeing her for more than 2 months, Li Daocheng really missed her. After the joint examination of 100 schools ended, Li Daocheng needed to decide what to do next based on his results. His initial plan was to bring Yinping, Li Qingyao, and Li Tianyang to Planet Crimson Sunday. Now that Li Daocheng had changed his mind, perhaps Planet Kangwu was the best choice. With so many strange things happening on Planet Crimson Sun, it seemed very unsafe. The hot-blooded upgrader in Li Daocheng's body had become very restless recently and would occasionally emit a slight alarm. It was an indisputable fact that Hades' actions were increasing. The news reported every day that the situation at the front line was getting more and more tense. After Li Daocheng sent the message to Yinping, he immediately replied to Ding Fugui, telling him that he had arrived at Planet Kangwu. Half an hour later, Li Daocheng was still in the same spot as a high-end commercial flying shuttle descended from the sky. Ding Fugui excitedly came down from the flying shuttle. Brotherly, I haven't seen you for more than a month. I missed you so much, the little fatty said in a mushy manner. At the same time, he stretched out his arms to hug Li Daocheng with an excited expression. Although Ding Fugui had the intention of befriending Li Daocheng, his current state was not fake. It was genuine. After going through life and death on planet tongue pulling, the two of them could be considered friends in adversity. Li Daocheng dodged slightly, and Ding Fugui's hug missed. He staggered and almost fell. Fatty, I heard you got promoted, Li Daocheng said with a faint smile. It's all thanks to Brotherly. It's all thanks to you that I got promoted. Ding Fugui scratched his head. Thanks to me? How could that be? You fought for it yourself. Let's not talk about this anymore. Take me around first. I've only been to Planet Kangwu when I was young. I've almost forgotten about it. Okay, Brotherly, get on. My mission for the next few days is to serve you well. Damn fatty, don't flatter me. I'm not your superior. You don't have to be like this with me. Speak properly, speak normally. If you don't speak properly, I'll ask Qinjian for someone else to take care of you. Don't, I'll speak properly. Ding Fugui was so scared that his head shrank back. Let's go. 3 hours later, a majestic, prosperous, and bustling cultivation city appeared in front of them. From afar, the sky was densely packed with all kinds of flying shuttles. It was many times denser than Blue Bay Star and Planet Crimson Sunday. This was nothing. Sword Kinesis flight cultivators could be seen everywhere. This was rare on a 4th-class cultivation planet. Occasionally, 1 or 2 of them would pass through the sky, causing a huge commotion below. You're tuning into the Warrior Lore YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.